Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michael Reese. In February 2015, around 8 p.m., the Morris Police Department received a call from a woman named Cindy Reese, 40. She reported that when she returned home from the store, she found the front door wide open. Inside, she found items scattered on the floor. Cindy attempted to contact her husband, Michael, but he did not answer. Feeling scared, she did not go further into the house. Instead, she went to a landline near the main entrance, called the police, and then walked outside. After the call, at 9:11 p.m., Cindy contacted Michael's father and informed him that their home had likely been burglarized and asked him to come immediately. Michael and Cindy lived in the Morris Center on Bank Street, right across from a police station. The police quickly went to Michael's house. When they arrived, they found Cindy standing outside looking scared. Inside the home, police found a chaotic scene, with a table overturned and furniture scattered about. They soon found Michael Reese, 40. At the back of the home, he was found dead on the floor in an unusual position. Michael had been shot in the back of the head. Michael Reese was born in July 1974 in Alabama. From a young age, he loved fishing. Michael finished high school and attended college, where he studied computer technology, eventually securing a job in that field. He was skilled with computers and often helped others. Although Michael got married, his first marriage ended in divorce due to his wife's infidelity. He didn't dwell on this loss since they had no children and continued to seek the right partner for himself. In 2008, Michael was introduced to Cindy by a mutual friend. They were nearly the same age, and a strong connection quickly developed between them, leading to a passionate romance. Cindy was born in January 1975 in Alabama. Her father served as an assistant pastor in a Baptist church, and she often accompanied him to work as a child. Growing up, Cindy was a model student who adhered to the rules. She graduated from college with a degree in accounting. In 1995, Cindy married, but her first marriage ended in tragedy in 2007 when she returned home from work to find her husband deceased. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Cindy was devastated by her husband's death. A year later, in 2008, she met Michael Reese, and they fell in love. They married on September 5, 2009, and spent their honeymoon at Disneyland. After the wedding, they moved into Michael's grandmother's house in Morris. Cindy worked as an accountant at the Jefferson County Courthouse, while Michael was a computer technician at St. Vincent's Hospital in Birmingham. The couple had no children and, like many in Morris, spent a significant amount of time at church. Cindy, who grew up in a Lutheran family, convinced Michael to join the Sardis Baptist Church. After his baptism, they attended services together every Wednesday and Sunday. Cindy was also the music director of the church. Unfortunately, Michael received sad news when his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Concerned about her health, Michael visited her often and spent much of his time caring for her. On February 14, 2015, Michael celebrated Valentine's Day with his mother, but just 4 days later, on February 18, he was tragically murdered. Michael was known as a kind and positive young man, generous and trustworthy. Police quickly opened an investigation into his murder. Michael had been shot once in the back of the head. Inside the house, everything was in disarray. The police suspected that the Michael family was targeted for a robbery that went wrong. On the table, there was still uneaten fast food. However, investigation revealed no evidence of a break-in through the front door. Hours after the murder, Cindy Reese was taken to the police station for questioning. She explained that on February 18, she and her husband, Michael, had gone to work during the day. In the evening, Michael picked her up and they visited Cindy's mother. Around 6 p.m., they attended a church service, which ended at 7 p.m. They then stopped at a cafe to order some fast food and take it home. As they were getting home, Cindy suddenly remembered that she needed to buy groceries and told Michael that she would go and get the groceries and hurry home. Michael took the fast food and left. Cindy went to the supermarket and was gone for about 30 minutes. When she returned home, she found the front door wide open. Worried, she looked inside and saw things scattered everywhere. She called out to her husband but got no answer, which scared her, and she decided not to go any further into the house. Worried, she immediately called the police and walked out. At that time, she did not know that her husband, Michael, was dead. Cindy reported that a .38 revolver and some jewelry were missing from their home. When asked who might have killed Michael, Cindy said that as she was driving near her home, she saw a strange man wearing a black hoodie walking down the street. She also shared that she and Michael were planning to have children and had even added a room to their home. They were in the process of renovating, with the assistance of a contractor. Cindy speculated that this man might be involved in the murder. The interrogation lasted for several hours. During this time, Cindy listed all of her close friends, co-workers, and acquaintances that she and Michael had interacted with. Police noticed that when Cindy mentioned an old family friend, she appeared very happy. Meanwhile, the entire town knew that Cindy was having an affair. Although everyone suspected her secret relationship, Cindy denied it and refused to admit to any adulterous behavior. Her lover was Jeffrey Brown, the pastor of the Baptist church. Church members mentioned that they had seen Jeffrey and Cindy kissing in the car several times, but for some reason, no one spoke up about it. During questioning, Cindy denied having an affair with Jeffrey, claiming that they were just friends who occasionally walked around town together. Jeffrey was also questioned. He stated that on the evening of February 18th, he was in another city, 50 miles away from Michael's family home, and had nothing to do with Michael's murder. Jeffrey openly admitted to having a romantic relationship with Cindy. They first met in August 2013 when Jeffrey was a candidate for pastor at Sardis Baptist Church. At the time, Cindy was a pastor and worship leader at the church, and she had been married to Michael for 4 years. Jeffrey was also married to a woman named Noelle and had 2 children. Michael's family developed a close friendship with Jeffrey. They spent time together and went on vacations. However, in late 2013, a secret affair began between Jeffrey and Cindy. This affair did not go unnoticed by church members, leading to rumors. As a result, Jeffrey was forced to leave the Baptist church because the leadership believed that an adulterer was not fit to be a pastor or a role model for the congregation. Before becoming a pastor, Jeffrey was a Marine, a police officer, and then a hairdresser. At the time of the Michael family tragedy, he was working as a pest control specialist. Jeffrey and Cindy continued their affair, and Jeffrey divorced his wife, Noelle. However, Cindy chose to stay with her husband, Michael. During questioning, Jeffrey expressed his frustration with Cindy's unwillingness to leave Michael, claiming that Michael had abused her. Despite the accusations, Jeffrey denied any involvement in the murder. After questioning Jeffrey, Cindy confirmed that she was indeed having an affair with him. She revealed that her relationship with Michael was fading. He spent too much time on his phone and playing video games, often neglecting her. On weekends, Michael enjoyed fishing and the couple rarely had intimate moments. In the summer of 2014, Cindy confessed to her husband, Michael, that she had cheated on him. Although he was understandably upset, Michael assured her that he did not want a divorce. The couple made an effort to repair their relationship. To celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary, they visited Disneyland, hoping to rekindle the romance they once had. Michael was aware that Jeffrey, Cindy's lover, had intentions of winning her over, which made him fearful for his family's well-being. While being questioned about her relationship, Cindy talked about her time with Jeffrey. When asked if Jeffrey could hurt Michael, she replied, "Of course not, Jeffrey is a very religious man." The investigation into the case is still ongoing. Police have not found any witnesses or surveillance footage to confirm that a stranger wearing a black hoodie was seen walking down the street on February 18th. A contractor who was doing renovations for Michael's family has a solid alibi. He was at the church at the time of the crime. The initial theory of a robbery was dismissed because there were no signs of forced entry. While some items were missing from the house, most of the jewelry was intact. It appears the killer intentionally created a mess by overturning tables, throwing blankets on the floor, and making it look like a robbery. Cindy claimed that she was in the store at the time of the murder. She said she bought orange juice and ham. When she checked out, she added a few small items to her cart and paid for everything. The police found it odd that Cindy would rush to the store when their refrigerator was already full. They had eaten ham and orange juice for breakfast, so it seemed like there was no real need to buy those things. Additionally, Michael and Cindy bought fast food for dinner. Cindy loved good food and her relatives often commented on this. People commented that Cindy would not let her hot dinner at home get cold and would not go to the store without eating her favorite hamburger and fries first. Police went to Cindy's workplace. In her office, they found a wedding photo of her and Michael displayed on a shelf, framed with hearts. Below, next to her computer, was a photo of Cindy with Jeffrey. Police also discovered financial documents showing that Cindy had paid for the apartment where Jeffrey lived using her credit card. Jeffrey had frequent financial problems. In addition, the couple shared a bank account and Cindy had always supported Jeffrey financially. Police also discovered cell phone records that showed what happened on the day of the murder. Evidence from Jeffrey's cell phone showed that Jeffrey was near Michael's home at the time of Michael's murder, specifically at a gas station. Police also uncovered a disturbing incident that occurred a few months before Michael's death. Jeffrey had spoken to two of his co-workers, who were drivers, and asked if they could kill the man who had murdered his wife. Jeffrey offered to pay the two co-workers with money in his car as payment, but did not specify who the target was. He only mentioned that the man drove a white Honda Accord and worked at St. Vincent's Hospital. The description matched Michael Reese, but his co-workers declined the offer and reported Jeffrey's alarming request to the police. Less than a month after Michael was murdered, Cindy Reese and Jeffrey Brown were arrested on March 11, 2015. Neither of them admitted guilt. Police believe that on the night of the murder, Michael and Cindy returned home with takeout and intended to have dinner together. When Michael went to the back door to let the dog in, Cindy shot him in the back of the head with a revolver she kept at home. After the shooting, she created a mess, took several valuables, and went to the store. On her way, she disposed of the gun and jewelry, then returned home and called 911. Police are convinced that both Cindy and Jeffrey were involved in the murder, with Jeffrey likely being nearby at the time and possibly helping Cindy afterward. After Cindy's arrest, she was released from prison and lived freely while awaiting trial. She chose not to post bail for Jeffrey, who remained in custody. Just days before his trial in August 2016, Jeffrey sought a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Cindy. He said that Cindy had instigated Michael's murder, explaining that she was afraid to divorce her husband because she was concerned about how her family would react. Jeffrey mentioned that Cindy had previously expressed a desire to kill her husband, which he initially interpreted as a joke. On the night of the murder, he claimed to have overheard everything that happened between Michael and Cindy on his cell phone. He reported hearing the couple arguing both in the car and at home, as well as gunshots. After Cindy killed her husband, she asked Jeffrey to help her get rid of the gun. They arranged to meet at a gas station, where she gave him the gun along with some jewelry, which he discarded. Cindy's trial began in November 2016, and she denied all of Jeffrey's allegations. She admitted to meeting Jeffrey at the gas station but said he asked her to come because he was out of money for gas. Cindy said she gave him $15 to help him. During the trial, she maintained that she and Michael had no intention of getting a divorce and wanted to work on their marriage. She also claimed that she no longer had any feelings for Jeffrey and accused him of stalking her, her family, and their home. Cindy's arguments were dismissed, as Cindy had not provided financial support to Jeffrey while at the gas station. Police also discovered that Cindy had frequently exchanged explicit photos with Jeffrey, suggesting that their relationship had not ended. Cindy's lawyers argued that she had no motive to kill her husband and placed the blame squarely on Jeffrey. The defense portrayed Jeffrey as obsessive, impulsive, and manipulative. No traces of gunpowder or blood were found on Cindy's body or clothing, and the angle of the gunshot wound indicated that the shooter was taller than Cindy, about the same height as Jeffrey. To this day, it remains unclear who shot Michael and what exactly happened that night. Prosecutors argue that Cindy did the killing, with Jeffrey helping her dispose of the weapon. In 2016, Jeffrey Brown was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2036. On January 11, 2017, Cindy Reese was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her family believes she is innocent and is determined to fight for her release. In 2019, Michael's parents discovered that Cindy had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a lower security facility near the site of the murder. Michael's family went to court and successfully had her returned to a maximum security prison. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Deborah Jeter. Deborah Jeter was born in 1976 in Georgia, USA. She was raised in a loving family and since childhood had a passion for helping people. When it came time to choose a career, Deborah decided to become a nurse without hesitation. She enrolled in a local college and pursued her nursing education. Alongside her studies, Deborah also focuses on building relationships. Deborah's boyfriend is a young man named Lester Jeter. They began a romantic relationship, and later both decided to move forward with married life. After marriage, they had 2 children. Their first child, named Kern, a year later, they had a second child. Because of their close age gap, the siblings were very close and did everything together. After graduating from college, Deborah to work part-time as an anatomy and physiology teacher. She also joined an exchange program as a licensed professional nurse. From an early age, Deborah's daughters began experiencing problems. Deborah often shows aggression towards her children and sometimes she has no control over her behavior. In 2004, she was accused of physically assaulting her eldest daughter, Kirsten, during a quarrel. However, this was the first and only incident of such behavior, so the charges were eventually dropped. As a result of this incident, Deborah was briefly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and then underwent rehabilitation. She was diagnosed with several disorders, which were the cause of her depression. The experts concluded that Deborah's unusual behavior was linked to her mental disorders. The doctors reported that she managed to get these issues under control after receiving therapy. However, some of Deborah's neighbors believe she is still having difficulty controlling her behavior. Her frequent aggressive outbursts affected her husband and children, and she often acted impulsively. She would yell over anything, which was alarming. The situation seemed serious, as the police were repeatedly called to her house. However, every time the officers arrived, she would calm down. After the incident with Kirsten, Deborah avoided contact with the children. Each time, when the patrol officers would arrive, find nothing amiss, and leave after advising her to remain quiet and calm. Although there were numerous complaints about her loud and hot-tempered behavior, the officers felt powerless to intervene. This situation took a toll on her family, who bore the brunt of her aggression. Deborah's mental health issues seemed to get worse, leading to high tensions. Deborah's husband, Lester, struggled to endure the constant shouting and arguments. By 2009, the situation had become unbearable. In May, Lester decided to end the relationship and filed for divorce. Deborah was devastated. It seemed she genuinely loved her husband, but due to her mental health difficulty, so she was unable to control her behavior. Lester's decision to divorce was a significant shock for Deborah. She repeatedly tried to convince her husband to heal their relationship and discuss their issues. However, Lester was so frustrated with Deborah's behavior that he rejected any talks. Lester openly told his wife that their family had no future and he would never come back. He also mentioned that he intended not only to end the marriage but also to seek custody of the children. Lester was genuinely concerned that his wife might lose control when he wasn't around their daughters, fearing she might harm them. His worries were justified as Deborah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lester worries about the safety and well-being of his two daughters, Kelsey and Kirsten, but he cannot predict the tragic fate that will befall them. That same month, after Lester declared his intention to divorce, Deborah attempted to end her life. She ingested a lethal dose of antidepressants, but was saved by the doctor's quick response. The most distressing aspect of this incident was that Deborah did this in front of her daughters, making her husband even more worried about her mental health. He feared that the stress of the divorce could worsen Deborah's illnesses. Unfortunately, resolving the legal issues of divorce is time-consuming, making the divorce process complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, Lester was determined to proceed with the divorce to protect the children from their unstable mother. Deborah's mental health issues clearly worsened after her divorce proceedings started. She and her children moved in with her mother. Naturally, Deborah suffered the most, but her frequent outbursts of anger and constant aggression also affected the children. Lester wanted to resolve all the issues quickly to minimize the trauma for the girls. Unfortunately, time was not on his side. Deborah attempted to end her life, which was a shock for the children. They couldn't understand their mother's behavior or the struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Deborah, at 30 years old, risked losing everything she had built with her husband over the years. Her world was falling apart, so it was no surprise that she was deeply shocked. Lester was determined to take action. He understood how serious Deborah's problems were and the danger she posed to herself and others. After Deborah's attempted to end her life, Lester insisted that her contact a psychiatric care center, believing she would receive professional help, an accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment there. Deborah took his advice and was admitted on May 22, which came as a great relief to Lester. During her treatment, the children stayed with their father, Lester. He also attempted to obtain a restraining order to keep the children away from their mother. During this time, Lester decided that he should seek full custody of both children. He believed Deborah was unable to control herself and tried his best to ensure the children's safety. Lester has repeatedly applied to court to limit Deborah's meeting in contact with the two girls Kirsten and Kelsey. It was expected that she would not be discharged from the hospital after just 2 weeks. Lester believes that such a short period of treatment was not enough for Deborah to control her behavior, so she remains a threat to her children. However, she was discharged on June 4. By this time, Deborah had not succeeded in gaining full custody despite her efforts. The judge denied issuing a restraining order to limit Deborah's communication with her daughters, considering it excessive. The judge believed the children were not in danger because she had received treatment. A temporary arrangement was made where Deborah would have custody of the children on weekends, while Lester would care for them on weekdays. The day after the custody hearing, on a Friday, June 5, 2009, Deborah planned to pick up the kids around 6 p.m. Although Lester doesn't want to be away from his daughters, he had to comply with the court orders. He had no choice but to hand the children over to Deborah when she arrived to take them for the weekend. Kirsten and Kelsey were happy to see their mother despite her previous rejections. Kirsten and Kelsey genuinely loved her, missed her, and enjoyed spending time with her when she was in a good mood. The eldest daughter, Kirsten, even posted on social media that she would see her mom the next day and expressed her excitement. However, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited. It seemed like a long-anticipated reunion, and Deborah was also eager to see her daughters. During a conversation with Lester, she mentioned that she had a big surprise planned for the children. In reality, a terrible plan had formed in Deborah's mind, which she intended to carry out. Instead of going home, Deborah drove with the children for a while and arrived at an abandoned house near Highway 77. It was a strange and eerie place to take the children. But the girls trusted their mother and followed her, eagerly anticipating the promised surprise. They were impatiently waiting for their mother to organize a special event for them. However, after they entered the house, Deborah pulled out a weapon. Kelsey quickly realized what was happening, but it was too late. She managed to shout to Kirsten to run away. However, Kirsten didn't listen. She charged at their mother, trying to take the knife to protect Kirsten. The struggle was unequal. Deborah stabbed her youngest daughter Kelsey several times. Kelsey was already down, and the eldest daughter Kirsten was desperately fighting with their mother. She pleaded for her to stop, shouting, "This is madness," but Deborah seemed oblivious, ignoring her pleas. Having dealt with Kelsey, Deborah turned on Kirsten, who tried to escape. Deborah struck her, but the wounds were not as deep. The girl began to bleed heavily. Despite this, she clung to life, begging her mother to stop and spare her. Kirsten expressed her desire to live, and perhaps this plea helped Deborah finally regain her senses. She halted the attack and began pacing nervously around the rooms of the abandoned house. In a state of shock, Deborah called the rescue service and confessed that she had killed her child, saying multiple times that she had done so and apologized for her actions. When asked for her location, she informed them that she was in an abandoned house on Highway 77 and mentioned that one of the children was still alive, urging them to hurry and call an ambulance to save the one who wasn't dead. The dispatcher inquired about her name, but Deborah refused to disclose it, stating that she would not reveal her identity. She was pacing around the house, while Kirsten was still alive and pleading for help. Deborah was overwhelmed and couldn't explain what had happened. She asked the dispatcher not to shoot her, stressing that she didn't have a gun. She gave precise directions to the location so law enforcement and medics could find the abandoned house where she had harmed Kirsten and Kelsey. Deborah said one of the girls was already dead, and the other was barely hanging on, as she had cut her throat and was bleeding. She urged them to arrive as quickly as possible, otherwise, the girls' chances of survival were slim. Deborah spoke calmly to the dispatcher, despite being a bit excited. Her voice was generally calm and cold. The dispatcher found Deborah's behavior strange and began to suspect that she had no control over the situation. While waiting for law enforcement, Deborah alternated between calmness and shouting nervously, even insulting the dispatcher. The operator remained composed, continuing the conversation to prevent Deborah from doing anything reckless. Deborah mentioned that if they didn't hurry, she might lose control and harm her second child. She said this completely calmly and without any emotion. The dispatcher realized the situation was extremely serious and that Deborah was unstable. Deborah, who had mental health issues, spoke about her daughters as if they were objects, one whom she has eliminated from her life, while the other is in danger. However, this did not particularly bother Deborah, as she was mainly concerned about her own safety. Deborah repeatedly asked the dispatcher to ensure that the police wouldn't shoot her when they arrived. Although she understood the seriousness of the crime, her focus was on her own well-being, even though one of her daughters is dead, and the other daughter is barely alive. This thing was inconsistent with recent when she tried to end her life, which occurred shortly before the tragedy. However, Deborah clearly did not want to suffer. But is she ready to take responsibility for her actions? The police arrived at the scene and found Deborah on the street, still talking on the phone. She raised her hands to show she had dropped the knife and was unarmed. She repeatedly told the officers not to shoot her, insisting she had no weapons, was not dangerous, and would not attack. Deborah directed the police to an abandoned house where 2 bloody bodies were found inside. Although Deborah was a nurse, she did not attempt to help the children. While speaking to the dispatcher, she walked around the abandoned house and then went outside to avoid seeing the girls' bodies. Deborah wandered around the courtyard while Kirsten sat in blood next to her dead younger sister, Kelsey. Deborah's car was in the garage of the abandoned house, with a small knife on the car roof, the same knife she used to commit the massacre. The police quickly found the knife and arrested Deborah, placing her under constant surveillance due to concerns she might try to harm herself. Inside the abandoned building, officers encountered a horrifying scene. They discovered 2 girls. One of them, Kelsey, was in the bathroom, covered in blood. Because of her injuries, she died at that moment, having bled out in less than a minute. Kelsey was only 12 years old, and her mother had stabbed her with such force that she succumbed to the bleeding almost instantly. It's hard to imagine what Kirsten went through. She was found with similar injuries in the bedroom, but was still alive when rescuers arrived. Kirsten lay in a pool of her own blood, her eyes indifferent, indicating she had lost a big amount of blood. Quick action was crucial to save her life. Her throat was cut from right to left, damaging her airways and one of the main arteries. Surprisingly, her mother, Deborah, a nurse, attempted to clamp the wound to stop the bleeding while waiting for the medics. This may increase her chances of survival. In an emergency situation, the doctors rushed Kirsten out of the abandoned house and took her to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. They performed an emergency operation and battled to save her life for hours. Miraculously, the girl survived. After 4 days, Kirsten was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Her recovery was incredible, especially since it was initially thought she wouldn't make it. However, her challenges were far from over. Though she narrowly escaped death, a more troubling fact was that she and her sister were found in that abandoned house, having been attacked by their own mother. It's hard to comprehend the extent of the post-traumatic shock Kirsten experienced. During the summer, she was recovering from the operation, trying to come to terms with the fact that her younger sister Kelsey is dead and the fact that her mother was a murderer. At the time of the crime, Deborah lived with her mother in the small town of Malacca, Texas, which had a population of just 2,000 people. Investigators reviewed Deborah's cell phone records and discovered that after taking the children from their father, Deborah headed to Malakoff. There, she seemed to wander along the roads for a while, then she eventually stopping the abandoned house. Detectives believe Deborah was searching for a place to harm the children. Examining the actions of people with mental disorders is difficult, yet the incident in the abandoned house provides disturbing things into Deborah's motives. When life falls apart, depression and mental issues can lead some women to feel that ending their lives is the only option. In many cases, they kill their children first, believing it to be a merciful act. Under the strain of mental illness, a mother may think that her family's collapse will doom her children to endless suffering. In this mindset, she views murder as a way to free them from pain and hardship. Often, these women then take their own lives. In this situation, it's evident that Deborah had no intention of dying. She was frightened and did not harm herself, even fearing that the police might shoot her, showing that she valued her life. The murders of Kirsten and Kelsey were clearly motivated by revenge, intended to hurt Lester extreme pain. She aimed to deliver a cunning and cruel blow to him. The incident was truly alarming. Kirsten and Kelsey's father, Lester, tried to give this case a big push to draw attention to the trial, literally the day after the judge refused to issue a restraining order against Deborah. Instead, the judge agreed at the hearing that she would have custody of her daughter by the end of the week. This decision later raised many questions about whether the judge considered this decision reckless. Unfortunately, Lester's worst fears were confirmed. Deborah killed Kelsey and almost took the life of Kirsten. Lester tried his best to convince the judge that his daughters were in mortal danger. Under no circumstances were they allowed to see Deborah unsupervised. However, the judge maintained that their main goal is to strengthen and unite families, encourage parents to cooperate with each other, to ensure children receive love from both parents. This decision ultimately led to devastating consequences, but the judge's actions were still deemed legal, despite the tragedy that followed. The district attorney stated that it's not fair to blame only the judge for this situation. According to him, responsibility belongs to many parties: the doctors who allowed Deborah to leave the hospital, Lester, along with Deborah. Deborah was expected to face severe punishment due to her past actions. She had previously shown anger and aggression towards her children, including attempting to harm Kirsten. However, the decision to lift the prohibition order on her is still controversial and raises many questions. Generally, in 99% of cases, shared custody benefits children, allowing both parents to support, love, and communicate with them, fostering healthy development. Yet, this approach fails when a parent has serious mental health issues. Child Protection Services claim they were unaware of Deborah's behavior. Staff stated that if they had known about her try to end her life in front of the children, she would never have been allowed unsupervised contact. From that point on, people also focused on the possibility that the family had clearly become victims of leniency on the part of the mental hospital and the justice system. However, this could not be proven. It was known that Deborah had been in and out of such institutions multiple times, with discharges that came too soon. A comprehensive diagnosis typically requires at least 3 months of testing and observation. Treatment and medication may be prescribed based on test results, but their effectiveness is not guaranteed. Doctors then closely monitor the patient's condition, behavioral changes, and the progression of the disease, adjusting medication as needed. This process can take up to a month. And discharge is only considered after a stable improvement in the patient's condition. However, Deborah was released after just a few weeks, suggesting that she did not undergo the full range of required examinations and tests. Deborah promised Lester that she would take Kirsten and Kelsey out and give them a surprise. She wanted to plan a fun evening with activities like singing and reading. However, just 4 hours later, she called emergency services and confessed to killing her children. Her trial lasted a year, and on May 27, 2010, Deborah Jeter was formally charged with aggravated murder and attempted murder. Throughout the proceedings, Deborah was held in prison due to the high bail, which was unaffordable and reflected the severity of the crime. As a result, she remained behind bars until the start of her trial. Deborah's defense team proposed a deal to the prosecution due to the complexity and sensitive nature of the case. Prosecutors fear that Deborah's mental illness could lead to her being released without jail time. Furthermore, a full trial would require Kirsten, Deborah's daughter who had miraculously survived her mother's attack, to testify in court. To spare Kirsten the trauma of reliving the horrific incident, Deborah agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge, hoping to avoid the death penalty under Texas law. About a year after the murder, Lester and Kirsten visited Deborah in prison. Deborah explained that, due to the turmoil in her life at the time, so she genuinely believed killing her youngest daughter Kelsey was the only way to protect her children from future suffering. She thought that the family's breakup would cause everyone immense pain and, in her mentally unstable state, she saw the murder as the only solution, a twisted form of salvation. Deborah expressed regret about what happened, but she admitted that she still hates Lester and blames him for the tragedy, and she will never forgive him. Kirsten reminisced warmly about the past with her mother. They talked calmly and even laughed together. This was the last time Deborah could peacefully meet with her loved ones. Afterward, she was moved to another prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In her situation, this is seen as a lenient punishment because, without admitting guilt, she could have faced the death penalty. Lester was deeply shocked by the incidents, but inspired by his daughter, he decided to move forward. In 2015, he rebuilt his life, remarried, and he and Kirsten removed their social media profiles. Eventually, Kirsten reactivated her account but set it to private. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Hugelmayer. Raleigh, a rapidly growing city in northeastern North Carolina, is known for its rich history and beautiful oak trees. However, on September 1, 2017, a horrific crime rocked the city. That morning, at approximately 1 a.m., the Raleigh Police Department's 911 dispatch center received a call from 28-year-old Matthew Phelps. Phelps was distraught and said he had accidentally stabbed his wife, Lauren, to death while he was dreaming. He then suddenly woke up to find his wife lying in a pool of blood on the floor. "I took too much cough medicine and it affected me," Matthew explained to the operator, saying that it could cause a cold, but it made him feel better. He admitted that he had been unable to sleep at night. The operator asked Matthew to check on his wife, asking if she was breathing and if there was any visible movement in her chest. Matthew replied, "No, she didn't move." Then he noticed the blood on him and said it was dry, not wet. During the conversation, Matthew finally revealed the reason behind his strange behavior and revealed the events that led up to the incident. Patrol officers from the Raleigh Police Department arrived at Matthew's home on Patuxent Street. Upon entering the home, they found Lauren, 29, lying motionless on the floor, a bloody knife on the bed, and cough drops on the bathroom counter. Despite showing no signs of life, Lauren was taken to the hospital by paramedics, where she was pronounced dead. The investigation into Lauren's death led police to have conflicting theories about whether it was an accident or a targeted murder, after which they brought Matthew in for further questioning. An autopsy revealed the horrific extent of Lauren's injuries, with 123 stab wounds, including 44 to the face and the rest to the head, neck, and arms. The couple's social media profiles, which contain hundreds of photos, show a happy relationship. Matthew has a clean record, and from the outside, they appear to be a happy, carefree couple. However, it cannot be ruled out that Matthew's actions were influenced by a large dose of cough syrup. Can cause euphoria, delusions, and often make people act strangely. To unravel the mystery behind the murder, police dug into the couple's past. Lauren Hugelmayer was born on June 9, 1988, in Los Angeles County to a deeply religious family. Lauren had a normal childhood with her two older sisters, Beth and Brianna. Lauren graduated from Swain County High School in North Carolina in 2007. She went on to earn a degree in business administration and management from Appalachian State University in 2011. After completing her studies, she worked as an auditor at Quintiles. She also started a side business selling Scentsy products. She was very passionate about Scentsy, and her Facebook page was filled with photos and videos of her side business, including trips she took with other Scentsy sellers. Lauren was a member of Hope Lutheran Church, where she was a Sunday school teacher and taught children and youth at the church. In her mid-20s, Lauren reconnected with Matthew Phelps, a classmate of hers from high school. Lauren and Matthew initially lost touch after high school when he transferred schools, and Lauren's family moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. Notably, their childhood experiences were very different. While Lauren grew up in a loving family, Matthew was not so fortunate. Matthew's parents abandoned him at birth, leaving him to live with his grandparents from a young age. Matthew's parents divorced shortly after he was born. His biological father was not interested in him, and his mother remarried several times but never gave Matthew a family or a lasting relationship with any stepfather. Matthew grew up without parents, and despite his grandparents' best efforts to love and care for him, he felt a deep emotional void. This could have led to behavioral problems from an early age. He began hanging out with bad friends and developed a habit of abusing drugs and alcohol during his high school years. Matthew and his friends were known to regularly use Corisodin, the same drug he claimed to have taken before attacking his wife. Of course, high doses do not cause a high, but Matthew and his friends took advantage of it anyway. Because of his addiction, Matthew's grandparents were forced to withdraw him from public high school and enroll him in a private Christian academy. This was successful, and Matthew improved significantly, earning better grades and eventually graduating. He then attended Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, and graduated in 2011. Matthew was the one who came across Lauren's photo and realized they knew each other. After some hesitation, Matthew contacted Lauren through Instagram, liking every photo she posted. The two began talking, and their text messages quickly turned into long, late-night phone calls. Before long, both Matthew and Lauren were falling for each other. The two began a long-distance relationship, as Matthew was still living in Kentucky at the time. Despite living hundreds of miles apart, their relationship began to develop quickly. After a while, Matthew tried to visit Lauren and eventually moved to North Carolina to be with her. Since Lauren was very close to her family, she was happy to introduce Matthew to them. Most of her family members welcomed him, trusting Lauren's choice. They saw him as a kind man who truly cared about their daughter. Lauren's mother, Lori, thought Matthew was the right person for Lauren. However, Lauren's father, Dale, had reservations about the relationship. His concerns may have stemmed from his protective fatherly instincts, or perhaps it was intuition. In Dale's opinion, Matthew was moving too fast and that he was likely hiding a secret from Lauren. Despite his suspicions, Dale could not pinpoint exactly what made him feel uncomfortable about Matthew. However, he chose to put his feelings aside because his daughter seemed genuinely happy. Eventually, Matthew became a part of the family. However, during a night out at Lauren's parents' house, he revealed a shocking secret. He had been in a failed marriage before he dated Lauren, but refused to share any other details. This confession raised concerns about his honesty and intentions, especially given his young age at the time of the divorce and the fact that he had kept it from Lauren for months. Lauren's family were particularly concerned and they noticed his body language seemed suspicious. Despite their reservations, Lauren's love for Matthew remained unwavering, and her family chose to support the couple as they continued their relationship. Matthew and Lauren eventually got engaged in 2015. The engagement party left a lasting impression on family and friends. Matthew's mother had a strained relationship with Lauren, which was evident when she wore a white dress to the wedding to show her disapproval. Despite this, the event was a success and the couple married the following year. The couple were avid Star Wars fans, and they incorporated this theme into their wedding. With their love for each other and their new life together, Lauren and Matthew seemed to be very happy. For Lauren, married life exceeded her expectations. She had her own home, a fulfilling job, and a loving husband who made her smile every day. However, the dream marriage soon turned into an ugly reality when Matthew began to show his true colors. Just a few months after their marriage, Matthew had difficulty finding a job, and when he did find one, he quickly left without much explanation. During his unemployment, Matthew spent most of his time playing video games. Meanwhile, Lauren worked multiple jobs to support the family. This created significant financial stress, which was exacerbated by Matthew's overspending on expensive electronics and gaming equipment. Lauren had saved about $10,000, but Matthew spent it all very quickly, spending $1,200 on iTunes and Xbox subscriptions alone. He even stole money from Lauren's purse if she refused to pay for his lavish lifestyle. Lauren had a decent amount of savings in her bank account before she married Matthew. However, by the time she died, there was only $1,000 left. In addition to Matthew's spending habits, there were other problems in the relationship. Lauren also had problems with Matthew's family. During a visit to his family home 6 months after the wedding, his mother was cold to Lauren and the couple argued the entire time. As a result, Lauren felt unwelcome and isolated. The disagreements mainly revolved around Matthew's spending habits, which hindered their ability to pursue their shared goals and dreams. As mentioned earlier, the couple was very fond of Star Wars and were trying to save money to take a trip to Disney World. However, Matthew would spend the little money they had saved on his own selfish habits. And Lauren suspected that Matthew was having an affair with their neighbor, with whom he frequently socialized. One evening, while Lauren was cooking dinner and talking to her sister Beth on the phone, Matthew came home from work, but instead of going with Lauren, he went out with his neighbor. He then sent Lauren a text saying he was having a great time eating with his neighbors and told her to go out to dinner alone, which further raised her suspicions. Although Matthew spent a lot of time with their neighbor, he was extremely possessive of Lauren. His possessiveness led to frequent arguments over a man at church whom Matthew suspected of flirting with Lauren. Matthew's suspicions of Lauren only increased the distance between them. He often used his past experience of being dumped by his ex-wife, who had met another man on a mission trip, to justify his insecurities. However, this justification did nothing to help their relationship, which was deteriorating. Lauren had confided in loved ones about her desire to leave Matthew less than a year after they were married because of his controlling nature. However, driven by her faith, Lauren was determined to make their marriage work and put thoughts of divorce aside. As a result, she continued to project a vision of a perfect marriage on social media, posting pictures and videos of the couple with affectionate captions that were in stark contrast to the reality of their troubled marriage. Matthew decided to return to college to become a pastor, hoping that this would save his marriage. However, his wife Lauren was not impressed and was fed up with his thoughtless and immature behavior. Lauren eventually decided to leave Matthew. But she would never get the chance to carry out that decision. Instead, she was brutally murdered by her husband in their bed. The investigation quickly pieced together the events. The crime scene appeared to be staged. The knife and cough syrup were carefully placed, and Matthew had only a small amount of blood on him, mostly on his shoes and a few drops on his shirt. This contrasted with the brutal nature of the crime, in which Lauren had been stabbed 123 times. The lack of blood splatter suggested that Matthew had washed himself, which disproved his claim that he was in a delusional state at the time of the murder. Traces of blood were found throughout the apartment after a luminol test, suggesting it had been cleaned up before police arrived. Matthew was notably expressionless when police encountered him at the scene of the crime. Cough syrup manufacturer Bayer later issued a statement denying any link between the syrup and the violent behavior. A medical examination found that the amount of the drug in Matthew's system at the time of the murder was minimal, making it unlikely to have influenced his actions. Despite this, Matthew maintained that the cough syrup was the cause, prompting police to continue searching for further evidence. The investigation into Matthew's motives led police to his diary, in which he detailed his relationship problems with Lauren, expressing low self-esteem and insecurity due to feeling unwelcome by her family. Despite Lauren's best efforts, Matthew never felt like he fit in well with her family. The neighbor Lauren suspected was related to Matthew, told police that they were just friends and had grown close through conversations about anxiety and depression. She also shared that, as they spent more time together, Matthew began discussing darker topics such as suicide and death, perhaps planning to take the licensed gun he knew she had in the house. Further investigation of Matthew's phone revealed a suspicious online search history. The searches included queries about the intoxicating effects of cough syrup, such as its ability to cause a foggy feeling and whether other people had ever been high. These searches alone suggested that Matthew may have planned the crime in advance and considered using cough syrup as a defense strategy. While this evidence was circumstantial and not enough to build a solid case, the discovery of a secret Instagram account at Marty_Radical, where Matthew posted dark content inspired by a movie, provided another important piece of evidence. Evidence showed that Matthew had a fascination with serial killers. This was evident in his portrayal of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho and his apparent interest in understanding what it was like to take another person's life, which he shared with a friend. Before killing Lauren, Matthew posted a photo on Instagram with the statement, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer," and the hashtag, "found an angel to kill." His Instagram account frequently referenced demons and evil. When the trial began, prosecutors felt they had enough evidence to prove that Matthew had intentionally killed Lauren. However, the defense argued that this action was out of character for Matthew and attributed his behavior to his unstable and depressed mental state at the time. To support this claim, they presented several letters from Matthew's co-workers to the judge, asserting that this was out of character for Matthew. The prosecution called Matthew's ex-wife to testify, contesting his earlier claims that she had cheated on him. Instead, she claimed that Matthew had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. Their marriage, which suffered from similar problems to his marriage to Lauren, included his refusal to work, overspending, and not contributing to their shared goals. These problems eventually led to their separation. Matthew ultimately accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, a felony punishable by death or life in prison without parole, to avoid the death penalty. When asked to confirm his understanding of the plea, Matthew replied, "Yes, sir." He also admitted to stabbing his wife, Lauren Hugelmeyer, multiple times. On October 5, 2018, the case against Matthew Phelps came to an end when he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At his sentencing, Matthew addressed Lauren's family and apologized, saying that he deeply regretted taking Lauren's life, which he admitted had deeply affected many people. Lauren's family did not accept Matthew's apology, finding it hollow and insincere. In response, a family member expressed anger and hatred towards Matthew, stating that they could never forgive him for his insensitive actions. To this day, Lauren's family still feels guilty for not intervening when they knew the relationship had taken a turn for the worse. To help others like their beloved Lauren, they founded an organization called Lauren's Light, which raises awareness about abusive relationships and domestic violence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nicole Vanderheyden. Nicole met Douglas in January 2015. At the time, she had been through a marriage, 2 children, and a divorce. After they began dating, Nicole and Douglas began living together, and within a few months, Nicole discovered she was pregnant. Both Douglas and Nicole were excited about the prospect of raising children together. In May 2016, Nicole, Douglas, and their 3 children, the youngest of whom was 6 months old, lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin. On Friday night, May 20th, the couple decided to attend a concert to get some time off. They had arranged for a babysitter to look after the children while they were away at the concert. A photo was taken of Nicole happily chatting with Douglas and his friends. As the concert was coming to an end, Nicole and her friends decided to go to another bar to extend the night. Douglas said he would go to the bar after finishing a conversation with a friend. Surveillance footage showed Nicole having a good time at the bar while Douglas had not yet arrived to join her. After a while, Nicole became angry and sent him a text message, accusing him of being unfaithful. At around 12:30 a.m., she tried calling Douglas, but he did not answer. Feeling annoyed, Nicole asked a friend to call Douglas from their phone and he answered. Nicole was upset that Douglas had ignored her calls. She got up and walked towards the exit, although her friends tried to stop her, but could not stop her from leaving. Annoyed, Nicole ran out into the street, turned the corner of the building and disappeared into the dark night. When Douglas and his friends realized she was gone, they began searching for her. They drove around the nearby streets, but could not find her. They eventually returned to the bar, had a few more drinks, and then went home. At around 5:30 a.m., Douglas called the police to report that his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheiden, was missing. He gave her a description of her appearance. That same day, a local farmer contacted the police after finding the body of a woman in tall grass near his farm in Brown County. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but upon closer inspection, he noticed her blonde hair. The woman was found naked, except for socks and a pink bracelet on her wrist. There was a lot of blood in the area, and she had severe injuries to her face. When the police examined the body, they confirmed that it matched Douglas' description, identifying the deceased as Nicole. The location where her body was found was just 3 miles from Nicole's family home. Douglas was called in for questioning. He explained that he and a friend had left a bar that night around 2:30 a.m. His friend had dropped him off at around 3 a.m. After entering the house, Ditry went to sleep and woke up around 5:30 a.m. He realized Nicole had not returned home and immediately called the police to report her missing. Ditry maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in Nicole's disappearance or death. He was shocked when police informed him that Nicole's body had been found at the farm. At the same time, police obtained a search warrant for Douglas' home. During the search, they found blood on the garage floor and in the back seat of their car. Additionally, a pair of Air Jordan sneakers were discovered in the garage, matching the shoe prints found at the scene where Nicole died. Blood stains were also found on the soles of the sneakers. In the early morning hours of May 21st, a patrol officer found several items belonging to Nicole along a freeway approximately 2 miles from where her body was found. These items included her purse, cell phone, and clothing, and were found near a building across the street from her home. At this location, police also discovered numerous blood stains and several locks of blonde hair, as well as a phone charger. Police collected more than 70 pieces of evidence and sent them for forensic analysis. They worked to reconstruct the events of the tragic night that led to Nicole Vanderheiden's death. Initially, police believed that a confrontation had occurred between Douglas and Nicole as she returned home that night, leading to the crime taking place outside. They believed Nicole had been killed about 120 feet from her front door. As a result, Douglas was arrested and taken into custody. However, after 18 days, forensic analysis revealed that the blood found in the garage, car, and near the neighbor's house did not belong to Nicole. In fact, it was not human blood at all. Furthermore, the stains on his sneakers were not blood. On the night of the incident, Douglas wore a fitness tracker on his wrist that recorded his movements. This data supported his statement to the police. He drove home that night, checked on his children, and then went to bed. As a result, Douglas was cleared of all suspicion and released from custody. The investigation team wanted to understand why Nicole had come so close to her home, especially since her body was discovered just 3 miles away. They reviewed surveillance footage from a bridge in Green Bay and hypothesized that if Nicole had been walking, she would have crossed that bridge. However, they found no useful clues. A key finding was that blood samples taken from Nicole's clothing, garage, car, and neighbor's yard did not match her DNA. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. This created a major obstacle for forensic experts, who were unable to definitively identify him. However, a breakthrough came in August, nearly 3 months after the traumatic incident. The forensic lab informed police that they had successfully isolated DNA material from one of Nicole's socks. The DNA sample was comprehensive and reliable. When they entered the DNA results into the national database, they found the name of George Stephen Birch, a man who had lived in Virginia. George moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin, on March 1, 2016, in search of a fresh start. A longtime friend gave him a place to stay and helped him find a job. The friend also loaned George a red Chevrolet Blazer, which was later involved in an accident and caught fire. A few weeks after Nicole Vanderheiden's death, police ran a background check on George in the local police database and found a report of a car accident involving him. The report led them to his address. Police then went to George's neighborhood and saw him on his porch. Police confiscated his cell phone. The team working on the Nicole case requested a copy of the data from George's phone. By analyzing cell tower records, local Wi-Fi networks, and GPS data, police determined that on the night of Nicole's disappearance, George was at a bar just a half-mile from where Nicole was staying with friends. GPS data showed that at 2:30 a.m., he left the bar and drove to Nicole's house, staying there for about an hour before going to the farmhouse where Nicole's body was eventually found. He then went to the location where her clothes were found. By 4:22 a.m., George had returned to his home. 4 months after Nicole's death, George was arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. On February 19, 2018, George went to trial. His defense team attempted to blame Nicole's boyfriend, Douglas. However, prosecutors believed that Douglas had nothing to do with her death. They presented evidence from his health monitor, which showed that he had been asleep during the time Nicole was brutally attacked near the farm. On the third day of the trial, Douglas testified, revealing that he and Nicole had planned to get married and had discussed it on the night of the tragic event. He said they were enjoying the concert and had been drinking, although Nicole was not usually a heavy drinker. But she had drunk more than usual that night. When Nicole decided to go to another bar with friends first, Douglas and his friends chose to stay at the concert venue to continue partying, including drinking and drug use. Douglas admitted that he had spent some time with Nicole at the bar, and during that time he had received angry messages from her accusing him of being unfaithful. Nicole had called him several times and eventually her phone battery died. Douglas expressed his confusion and concern about Nicole's anger toward him that night, and he adamantly denied any connection to her disappearance and subsequent death. Shortly after Douglas testified in court, George's defense attorney presented a key piece of evidence: text messages that Douglas had sent to his mother just 10 days before the incident. In one message, Douglas stated, "I'm actually thinking about telling Nicole and the kids that they have to move out." He later explained that the messages were not intended to be taken seriously. Additionally, George's attorney presented testimony from Douglas's former girlfriends, who described him as a jealous and controlling person who often treated them badly. One ex-girlfriend even claimed that he had installed a tracking device on her phone to monitor her movements on the night of Nicole's disappearance. After Nicole's tragic death, she confronted Douglas, accusing him of not only being unfaithful but also cruel. Douglas continued to deny all allegations and maintained that he had never been unfaithful to Nicole, nor had he ever raised a hand against her. In court, the nanny who was at Douglas and Nicole's home the night they attended the concert testified. She recalled asking Douglas where Nicole was when he returned. Douglas replied, he didn't know. She hit her head and just wanted to walk home. On the 8th day of the trial, George Birch presented his account of the events of that night. He began by describing himself as a hard worker and a caring family man. On the evening of May 20th, he was at a bar where he met Nicole. George claimed that they had flirted and that he felt Nicole was open to his advances. He described their conversation as friendly, lasting until the bar closed at around 2:30 a.m. He then drove her home, parking near the driveway to continue the conversation for a few more minutes. George explained that they had consensual sex in his car, with Nicole participating. He said that he could not sit comfortably in the back seat because of his size, so he stood by the open back door while Nicole remained inside. After their intimate moment, he suddenly felt an attack from behind that knocked him unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on the ground and saw Douglas nearby, pointing a gun at him. There was a lot of blood around, and George said he was not sure if Nicole was still alive at that time. When Douglas arrived at the farm, he was armed and carried Nicole's body into the tall grass. He later described a sudden confrontation with Douglas. George used force to push Douglas to the ground. He then said he was able to get away from Douglas and return to his car. George then fled the scene and threw Nicole's belongings out of the car window. The next day, George went fishing with friends, including a photo taken on May 21st. Notably, he did not report the incident to the police or tell his friends what happened that night. The prosecutor argued that George's testimony was highly suspect. Nicole would not have willingly agreed to satisfy a man she barely knew, especially by exposing her buttocks out of the car window at her own home. The prosecutor argued that George intended to have sex with Nicole in his car, but she refused. When she tried to leave the car, George became angry. He grabbed a phone charger and used it to strangle her, then stripped her down to her socks. He then dumped her body in clothes and went home, hoping to avoid being caught. The prosecutor argued that George's story was full of contradictions. After the attack, dumping of the body, and escape, George went fishing with friends the next day and seemed to be having a good time. Additionally, the prosecutor showed the court Nicole's dirty clothes. If George's testimony was correct, her clothes would have been clean, since George had said she had taken them off in his car. However, in reality, Nicole's clothes were covered in blood and dirt, indicating that she had resisted while wearing them on the ground. Throughout the trial, 2 women were present, closely watching George and listening to everything he said. These women were identified as the sister and fiancée of Joey White, who died in 1997. The suspect in White's death was George Birch, White's neighbor. Although George was acquitted and released at the time, White's fiancée and sister continued to believe that he was responsible for the death of their loved one. After 19 days of testimony and jury deliberations, the judge announced his verdict. George Birch was found guilty of attempted murder. Although the judge believed George deserved the death penalty, state law mandated a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Douglas was relieved, as he had been worried about facing new charges in Nicole's death. Without the evidence from the fitness bracelet, he would still have faced prison time. George Birch was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring that he would never hurt anyone again. Nicole's children are now being raised by their biological fathers. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Teresa Conall. James Conall was born on February 22, 1950, in Dayton, Ohio. He was the son of Ruth Slack and John Conley. They had 4 more daughters and 3 sons. The family was wealthy. His grandfather, Fred Conley, was a successful businessman and inventor who founded a company and held nearly 300 patents for innovations, including one of the first price marking machines. Despite his business success, little is known about James' early life. However, it is clear that he chose a different career path. Instead of joining the family business, he moved to North Georgia, where he worked diligently to create a successful company in the field of holistic medicine. James was assisted by Bonnie White, the accounting manager of his company. In return for her work, James also provided chiropractic care to Bonnie's children and grandchildren. As Bonnie said, James's kind and compassionate nature helped him build a loyal clientele. Over time, the business grew and James realized the need to hire more employees. At the time, 21-year-old Teresa Conall applied for the job and was accepted. She would be responsible for welcoming visitors to the company. Teresa, who was from Harlan, Kentucky, met James when she got a job at his company. Despite their 20-year age difference, they fell in love and began dating. After marrying in 1997, Teresa and her husband had their first son, Caleb, in 1996. They later opened the Alpha Wellness Center in Dalton, Georgia. At the center, Teresa worked as a massage therapist, helping people achieve good health. As a friend of the couple, Bonnie witnessed their professional growth. She said that Teresa was a truly wonderful massage therapist. Their second child, Allison, was born in 2000. And soon after, they moved to a spacious house in Ringgold, Georgia, located near the tennis courts. The marriage was stable and happy, and the children grew up in comfort and love. Christmas was a special time of year for Caleb, who immersed himself in the joy of the holiday season, surrounded by gifts, a beautifully decorated tree, and the warmth of a fireplace. As he immersed himself in the happiness of the moment, he dreamed of many ways to protect himself and, in turn, his loved ones. James took out a $500,000 life insurance policy from Tom Drew, naming Teresa as the sole beneficiary. He also insured their home at the same time. However, their ideal life begins to fall apart over time due to growing rumors of infidelity in their marriage. At Alpha Healthcare, the news eventually spread to all the staff. Unfortunately, the situation worsened due to rumors of infidelity in James and Teresa's marriage, as well as financial difficulties. James's health began to decline after contracting Lyme disease, leaving him unable to work. Meanwhile, Teresa underwent 4 surgeries and suffered a miscarriage, leading to severe depression and substance abuse. At the same time, Bonnie discovered that Teresa had been illegally embezzling money from the business. In 1 month, Teresa herself wrote 16 checks. When James confronted her about this in front of Bonnie, his wife denied everything, claiming that the checks had been canceled. However, Bonnie, as the accountant, claimed that the canceled checks would not be cleared through the bank, and she later produced a bank statement, putting Teresa in an awkward position. A rumor began to circulate among the couple's staff, claiming that Teresa had secretly put lithium in James's coffee. James himself eventually revealed the rumor, rather than suppress the speculation. An investigation revealed that their relationship had deteriorated to the point where divorce was being considered, although the details remained unclear. By mid-2007, the family situation had become unstable. 2 cars had been repossessed and James appeared visibly depressed. However, the announcement that he was about to be evicted for failing to pay the mortgage was a wake-up call for the couple. Teresa devised a plan to resolve her marital, financial and personal crises. The plan began with her pretending to be her husband and writing a letter to their agent, Tom Drew, stating that her husband had decided to end his life. Early on Friday morning, June 29, 2007, Teresa prepared to carry out the rest of her plan. During their usual breakfast, Teresa secretly added strong antidepressants to her husband's food. In the meantime, she refused to eat, telling her husband that a friend named Robin would be picking her and the children up. The woman took the children to a friend's house after James had taken the medication. Teresa then returned home to prepare for her trip. She quickly gathered what she considered important items, including photos of the children. Next, she lit a fire between the office and the bedroom. Caleb and his sister were waiting in the car and saw their mother leave the house last. She lit a cigarette as she walked away. From the car, Caleb noticed smoke coming from the house and became frightened. He warned his mother about the smoke, but she reassured him that it was just burning papers and that there was nothing to worry about. Gary Carlock, a local grocery store owner, was on his way to work when he saw smoke coming from a house and quickly called emergency services. Fire crews arrived at the scene at 9:42 a.m. After assessing the situation, they determined that the fire could not be extinguished from the outside, so they decided to enter the house through the back door, which led directly to the bedroom. A firefighter examined the room and noticed a disturbing image on their thermal imaging equipment, indicating the presence of a person. As they cautiously approached through the smoke, they found the person kneeling by the bed, apparently praying. The person was unconscious but did not appear to have suffered severe heat burns. However, their skin and clothing were heavily covered in smoke. Firefighters described the scene as a typical arson fire. They initially identified the victim as James, 57, the homeowner, and quickly pronounced him dead. The raging fire destroyed everything, including potential DNA evidence or signs of foul play, leading police to initially suspect the death was accidental. Police eventually reached James' wife, Teresa, by phone to report the incident, who was in Georgia. When Teresa left town, she contacted her insurance agent just minutes later. However, the children were devastated to hear the news about James, their beloved father. Although they had their own problems, he always showed them how important they were in his life. An extensive investigation was launched, but progress was slow due to a lack of leads. Teresa was interviewed by police that evening and recounted the events of the morning. She said she left the house at 8:15 a.m. and stopped at a restaurant on the way. Robin, Teresa's friend, was also questioned, and his story largely matched Teresa's, except that he claimed they left 30 minutes later, at 8:45 a.m. The fire inspector determined that the fire started at a point along the shared wall between the office and the bedroom where the victim was found. As officers continued to search the house, a trained dog was brought in to assist. The dog helped detect the presence of arson at the source of the fire, clearly indicating that it was set deliberately rather than accidentally. On July 5, 2007, officers interviewed Teresa to piece together the events of that day. Teresa stated that she loved her husband very much and attributed their financial difficulties solely to James' illness. She described their marriage as stable and reliable. Friends and colleagues of James confirmed that his failing health had forced him to stop working, causing difficulties for his business. At the time, Tom Drew reported to police that he had received a handwritten letter from James in which James expressed his intention to end his life. However, there were countless ways to do it, much simpler, less painful. It was hard to believe he would choose such a method. The medical examiner determined James' cause of death to be smoke inhalation, and toxicology tests showed that he had been under the influence of strong antidepressants at the time of the fire. Burns on the soles of his feet indicated that he had tried to put out the flames. Based on this evidence, forensic psychologist Sanji believed the death was the result of homicide. Police re-interviewed Robin, focusing on inconsistencies between his account of events and Teresa's. Robin testified that after putting the children in the car, Teresa went back into the house and did not return for 15 to 20 minutes. The investigation led the team to a restaurant where Teresa and her children stopped for a snack. Security footage showed them arriving at 9:17 a.m. on the day of the fire. Since their home was only a 10-minute drive away, police suspected that Teresa might have been home when the fire started. A closer look at the timeline confirmed this theory, and police obtained a search warrant for Teresa Connell's home. When they arrived, they found the family's personal belongings stored in the garage, as well as unfiled divorce papers. Further investigation uncovered 2 insurance policies, one for life and one for the home. As police zeroed in on Teresa, they learned details about the loss of her youngest child and her subsequent drug addiction. From that point on, based on the evidence they found, she was considered the prime suspect. During a subsequent interview, the couple's employees talked about rumors of an affair, so police decided to call Teresa back. During her second conversation with the police, Teresa not only defended herself, but also began to change her story. According to Teresa, her husband James was a cruel madman, and she even said that in her opinion, he was capable of starting the fire himself, even if it meant completely destroying the property. When asked by the police, she told them about the morning of the incident. Teresa tried to recall her morning routine. She said that she and her husband usually woke up around 6:30 to 7 o'clock. They usually spent this time together, either drinking coffee or chatting. However, she could not provide further details, saying that her actions were out of habit. The drugs found in James' blood were the first topic that the police wanted to address, so they started by asking Teresa about the drugs her husband was taking. Initially, she listed them without any problem, but when the police wanted to know which specific drug made James sleepy, she suddenly forgot the name. She then asked for a moment. She tried to recall the name, which began with a C, presumably C. Carville. However, when asked about the insurance policy, which they believed would be a crucial solution to the woman's problems, Teresa chose to downplay its importance, claiming that she did not even care to know the value of the policy. It was clear that the investigation would be difficult, but Teresa persisted. The police then revealed an equally important piece of information. An incendiary substance had been discovered at the crime scene, but Teresa once again seemed to dodge the issue. Teresa defended her actions by explaining that her husband had painted the house a few days earlier, which would explain the presence of an incendiary substance. She also suggested that this substance could have been the cause of the fire and could have accelerated the spread of the fire. During the investigation, Teresa mentioned that she and her husband often drank coffee together every morning. The police found this information suspicious, thinking that she might have taken advantage of this opportunity to secretly give her husband sedatives. However, Teresa later revealed that her husband had not had coffee with her in recent months. This statement was completely contrary to her previous statement, and the police immediately pointed out the contradiction. Teresa even denied her own words and contradicted herself. At that time, the police only had circumstantial evidence against her. Until one of them suggested that she take a lie detector test, suggesting that she would do everything to prove that she did not kill her husband. However, before the test, Teresa was required to sign a written agreement stating that if the results showed deception, the police could use this evidence against her in court. As she prepared to undergo the test, Teresa's concerns shifted from the original crime to a new fear, the possibility that the polygraph test could be used as evidence against her if she failed. Before taking the polygraph test, she was concerned about how much information the police had on her, as a false answer could seriously damage her case. However, the results of the polygraph test showed that she exceeded the maximum lie detector threshold, indicating that she was likely hiding something. Based on the evidence gathered, on July 9, 2007, Teresa, 34, was charged with premeditated murder and 2 counts of first-degree arson. Her attorney later argued that the fire that led to the charges was actually a joint plan between Teresa and her husband, designed to improve their financial situation. After Teresa was arrested, her children, Allison, 6, and Caleb, 11, were placed in the care of Georgia Children and Family Services. During an interview on July 16, Caleb showed a surprising level of interest for his age. He told police what had happened that morning, including his mother returning home while he and his sister were in the car. Caleb also mentioned noticing smoke shortly afterward. He explained that his parents often burned trash in the backyard, which made the smoke seem normal at first. However, police said it was unlikely that his mother would have chosen to burn the trash just before leaving. Instead, they suspect she may have given James drugs that rendered him unconscious, then set fire to the bedroom while he was still in bed. Understandably, this was difficult for the children. However, despite the traumatic experience deeply affecting their young minds, they remained strong. Caleb's grandparents were then able to obtain custody, and the court was compassionate enough to allow Teresa to visit them. The police then shared evidence with Teresa, clarifying that her children could be called to testify against her. Initially, her defense contacted the district attorney's office, asking for a plea deal. The deputy district attorney investigating the case admitted that she had reached a fair and reasonable plea deal, not wanting her children to go through such trauma. 2 days after the trial, Teresa accepted the plea deal. On the morning of December 10, 2010, a hearing was held. At the hearing, the judge asked Teresa if she would plead guilty to aggravated manslaughter, to which she answered yes. Teresa later explained to the court that her actions were part of a financial scheme, but that she never intended to harm her husband. She asked the court for leniency. The court accepted her testimony and, as a result, granted her more visitation time with her children. Additionally, Teresa Conal was convicted of first-degree arson. The state dropped the premeditated murder charge as part of the plea agreement. Teresa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Hannah Potts. After Hannah Potts, 23, went missing, an investigation involving the FBI began. The case received a lot of media attention, and the unraveling of the mysterious disappearance shocked many people. Hannah grew up in a large family in Gibson County, Indiana, a rural area where many people make a living from farming. Her family owned a small farm, which her parents considered a safe and ideal place to work, live, and raise their children. The summer of 2020 was a turning point for Hannah's family, after which their lives changed forever. On July 23, Hannah was struggling with insomnia. She told her mother that she was going to go out for a walk around the farm, check on the animals, and maybe take some pictures. Hannah then took her phone and camera and left the house and headed toward the barn. The next morning, the family was shocked to discover Hannah was missing. Adding to their worries, a disturbing post appeared on her Facebook page, a video, largely black, suggesting it had been recorded in the dark. Hannah desperately pleaded, "Mom, can you hear me? Please talk to me, I really need to hear your voice right now. Something bad happened. I was taking pictures of animals and the man grabbed me. I think he was trying to scare me. He was about as tall as Jerry and had a deep voice. He said he wanted to help me, but I didn't believe him. I'm in a room with 4 walls and a little light. I have my phone with me and I want you to know that they know about this. Please talk, you have to tell the police everything that's going on. They can find me by looking at the videos or pictures on my phone. That man mentioned Ohio, but I'm not sure exactly where. Please tell everyone that I love them, and if I don't make it back, know that I love you all very much." Hannah's parents quickly alerted the police, and given the circumstances and the fact that even minutes can change everything in such cases, the FBI launched an investigation. News of the abduction spread quickly on social media and was picked up by major television stations across the country by the end of the day. Extensive media coverage was garnered, with a large number of volunteers joining Hannah's family in distributing thousands of informational flyers. The flyers included a description of Hannah's last known appearance. She was wearing a gray shirt and sweatpants when she was last seen at home around 2 a.m. The abductor's vehicle, a maroon sedan, was also described. Police appealed to the public for any information that could assist the investigation. Hannah's family used every resource at their disposal to find her, including using social media to quickly spread information about the abduction. Hannah's twin sister, Lauren, created a social media post to spread the word and seek support. The post read, "She is reaching out with a heavy heart, and she never thought she would be in this situation. She needs the help of her friends and family. Please share this post and the attached photo." If you have any information about her twin sister Hannah's disappearance, please contact the Princeton, Indiana Police Department or her family. Hannah posted a video earlier describing her kidnapping, and Lauren is desperate for her safe return home. The FBI attempted to locate Hannah by tracking her cell phone. On the day of her kidnapping, a cell tower a few miles from Hannah's family home picked up a signal from her phone. Around 6 a.m., Hannah posted a video to her Facebook page, but by then she was in custody. Her phone continued to pin to a nearby cell tower, indicating that she was likely being held at a location not far from her family home. Meanwhile, police had a lead on a suspect driving a maroon car, but they were unable to find anyone matching the description within a 5-mile radius of Hannah's home. While digging into Hannah's life and trying to find out if anyone she knew could be involved in her disappearance, police discovered that before she went missing, she had been in contact with a 34-year-old woman named Maria Hopper, who lived just a mile from their home. Police arrived to speak with Maria, who confirmed that she knew Hannah but said that she had last seen her a few days before the kidnapping. This seemed like another dead end, but when police obtained a cell phone carrier report and were able to access Hannah's social media page, where she had posted her heartbreaking plea, it became clear that Maria Hopper had lied when she said she had seen Hannah a few days before the kidnapping. Hannah went missing in the early morning hours of July 24th. 2 days later, on July 26th, police visited Maria's home. During this visit, Maria told police that she had no information about Hannah's whereabouts. Maria's boyfriend, Joshua Thomas, 45, was also present and claimed he did not know Hannah. The police asked Maria for permission to look around the house. The woman reluctantly agreed but immediately stated that Hannah was not in her house. The police found nothing suspicious inside except for a staircase in the kitchen leading down to the basement. Maria said that there was nothing but unnecessary things in the basement, but the police decided to check the basement themselves. In the basement, the police discovered a strange piece of plywood that stood out among the other dusty items. Its cleanliness suggested that it had not been stored there as long as the other items. Furthermore, it appeared to be blocking the entrance to a separate area of the basement. As an officer began to remove the plywood, Maria interjected with an important statement. Before we continue, however, let's review the recording Hannah made. When shared on social media, many were quick to point out the strangeness and incongruity of Hannah's actions in the video. She recorded a 6-minute video, raising questions about why she prioritized her time filming instead of calling for help immediately. It is also unclear why the kidnapper did not search her and confiscate her phone. The purpose of the video is also puzzling, especially since it was filmed at 2 a.m. on a farm. Additionally, her initial claim of being kidnapped by a man was later contradicted when she mentioned they, referring to multiple kidnappers. Despite having internet access and the ability to post on social media, she did not use this opportunity to identify her location and potentially seek help. Police have noted unusual behavior surrounding Hannah's disappearance. However, since people react differently to stress, they initially treated her disappearance as a kidnapping. The investigation was ongoing until police obtained records of communications between Hannah and Maria, which led to a breakthrough. At Maria's home, when an officer asked about a piece of plywood in the basement, Maria confessed that Hannah had been hiding behind it. The officer then pushed the plywood aside and ordered her to come toward him. When Hannah emerged, the officer found her right hand cuffed and her legs still working. The woman immediately admitted to the police that no one had kidnapped her and that she was sitting in the basement of her own free will. It turned out that Hannah had planned her own kidnapping, with the assistance of Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas. This became clear through their social media exchanges. The tone, content, and context of the messages read like fiction. The three were taken to the police station for further investigation after their arrest. As the police tried to understand the motive behind the incident, Hannah explained that she was an aspiring author writing a book. In an effort to gain inspiration and gain a deeper understanding of the experiences of kidnapping victims, Hannah decided to stage her own fake kidnapping. To achieve this, she enlisted the help of her friends Maria and Joshua, who became characters in her story. According to Hannah, her friends helped her plan and carry out the fake kidnapping by hiding her in their basement, providing her with food and drinks, and deliberately destroying her cell phone to avoid detection by the police. Hannah filmed a video of the alleged kidnapping and posted it on her Facebook page, causing great concern and distress to her family and others. Hannah rehearsed the video for about a week before making it without telling her family members about her plans. After the truth was revealed, her family apologized to everyone involved in the search and those who were concerned for her safety. Hannah's sister, Lauren, took to social media to publicly apologize and express her feelings about the situation. In her statement, Lauren said her family was deeply hurt and embarrassed by Hannah's actions, and they felt betrayed. Lauren made it clear that she no longer wanted any relationship with her sister and hoped Hannah would be held accountable for her actions. Lauren also addressed her concerns about Hannah's story targeting a person of color with a specific description of the car. She prayed that no one would be unfairly targeted or harmed because of her sister's false statements. Additionally, Lauren expressed regret for the pain her family has endured, including her 6-year-old son, who was deeply affected by Hannah's dishonesty. Hannah Potts kept a personal journal in her friend's basement in which she wrote that she expected her social media post to go viral. As a result of her actions, she is now facing charges of falsely reporting her own abduction. According to Gibson County Prosecutor Michael Cochran, Hannah's actions were not only criminal, but also caused significant distress to her family and everyone around her. Furthermore, by providing a false description of her alleged abductor, Hannah put innocent people at risk of mistaken identity. Furthermore, the case wasted valuable time and resources as multiple law enforcement agencies were involved in the investigation. In a time of limited resources, these wasted hours can never be recovered. Prosecutor Cochran stressed that such a callous disregard for others will not be tolerated. Maria Hopper and Joshua Thomas were charged with perjury and assisting in the concealment of a kidnapping hoax. During a police interview, Hopper admitted to picking up Hannah Potts from her home and lying about hiding her. Thomas also admitted to knowing about the staged kidnapping and Hannah's presence in his home. All 3 individuals are free on bail and awaiting trial. In September 2020, Hannah Potts pleaded guilty to filing a false kidnapping report. As a result, she was sentenced to 1 year of probation and 120 hours of community service. Joshua Thomas and Maria Hopper were also sentenced to probation. Some people who know this story believe that Hannah Potts faked her kidnapping to inspire her book and to attract attention to herself, which she hoped would boost her book's sales. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, affectionately known as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her father, William Gallagher, worked as a newspaper sales manager, while her mother, Jane Gallagher, was a dedicated teacher. From an early age, Susan showed a passion for learning and a strong love of literature, suggesting that she might follow in her mother's footsteps into the field of education. While studying at Grove City College, Susan met a young Air Force recruit named Kenneth Reinert. Although their meeting was simple, it had a profound impact on her life. Susan and Kenneth's relationship deepened as they both pursued higher education. After much effort and determination, Susan graduated from college with a bachelor's degree. She continued her education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University. In 1965, Susan and Kenneth began their new lives after graduating from Grove City College. Because Kenneth was in the military, they had to move around a lot. They started by moving to Sacramento, California, then returned to the Northeast and lived in Rome, New York. The family even lived in Puerto Rico for a while before settling permanently in the Philadelphia area in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhardt, a devoted teacher and loving mother, experienced a turning point when she and Kenneth decided to divorce. The divorce was amicable, without legal disputes. Susan then became an active single mother, focusing on building a home for her two children, Karen and Michael. With her warm and friendly personality, she was well liked by her colleagues and students at Chestnut Walled Elementary School. In addition to her teaching career, Susan was actively involved with Parents Without Partners, especially in the Valley Forge program. After her mother passed away, Susan found strength and support from this organization despite her grief. Despite many challenges, she persevered through her involvement with Parents Without Partners. Susan's story took a mysterious turn. On June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhardt and her two children spent their day together. That morning, her son, Michael, had been with his father, Kenneth. That evening, they had attended a father-son baseball game. However, the game ended early when Susan picked Michael up at 8:30 p.m. That evening, Susan contacted her ex-husband's parents, Florence and John Reinhardt. Despite their divorce, she had maintained a good relationship with them. Susan checked the gas tank and found it was nearly full, enough for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town about an hour's drive north. The purpose of the trip was to attend a single-parent conference and spend the weekend with her children. Susan had signed up to run a workshop there and keep the children involved in activities throughout the weekend. They planned to leave on Saturday morning and return home late Sunday. At around 9 p.m. on Friday night, Karen and Michael were playing outside, picking up hailstones left over from a summer storm. About 30 minutes later, neighbors heard Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon start. Minutes later, the car disappeared. Susan had left the house with her two children, possibly to visit her boyfriend before going to the conference. She was in a long-term relationship with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher. Although they tried to keep it a secret, the relationship was causing tension in Susan's marriage to Kenneth. There were even rumors that Susan and William might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan and her children set off after visiting her boyfriend. They planned to travel to Allentown, about 49 miles north, to spend the night at a motel. However, they never arrived. Susan and her children disappeared without a trace, leaving those who knew and loved them distraught. On June 25, 1979, Susan's Plymouth hatchback was discovered in the parking lot of the Host Inn in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan's lifeless body was found in the back of the car. The details of her agonizing death were gruesome. Her body was naked, beaten, and bound with chains, curled up in the wheel well of the car. Her hands were tied, and she had black eyes. She had been beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains left bruises on her back. More frighteningly, she had been injected with a fatal dose of morphine. The whereabouts of her two children, however, were unknown. They had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Police searched for hours. But no one had seen them, nor had any of Susan's friends or relatives seen them that weekend. So, the police began investigating further. They posted pictures of the Reinhardt family in newspapers for weeks, looking for any clues about the children. The investigation discovered that Susan had named William Bradfield, the man she thought she was going to marry, as the beneficiary of $730,000 in life insurance policies. This raised suspicions that her children might have been murdered so he could receive the money. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was in Cape May, New Jersey, the weekend Susan was murdered and her children went missing. Several teachers were present and confirmed his whereabouts. The police then turned their attention to Upper Marion High School, where Susan worked, as the school was experiencing problems. Principal Jay Smith was embroiled in a scandal. He had served as principal until he was fired the previous year after being arrested at a local shopping center. In his Ford Granada, police discovered loaded handguns, a balaclava, and burglary tools. More disturbingly, a syringe containing morphine was found in the trunk. Jay had been struggling before that. His wife, Stephanie Smith, was diagnosed with malignant cancer and died in August 1979 after several hospitalizations. During this time, Stephanie Smith began keeping a diary, documenting her husband's strange behavior, which became increasingly worse. Jay became involved in intimate groups and changed sexual partners, which Stephanie Smith did not approve of, and this seemed to lead to even more disturbing behavior. In September 1977, Stephanie Huntsberger, the adult daughter of the couple, moved in with her parents along with her husband, Edward Huntsberger. They settled into the Smiths' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, that fall. Stephanie Smith was battling cancer, which caused turmoil in the family and seemed to increase tensions among them. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, were struggling with heroin addiction and had difficulty finding and keeping jobs before deciding to move back in with their families. Moving in with their parents was a desperate attempt to escape drugs. In early 1978, Jay Smith's daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Huntsberger and Edward, mysteriously disappeared. They had moved in with Jay Smith and his wife just a few months earlier. They was last seen in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. When they left, they promised to return soon, but then they disappeared. Their disappearance was first noticed when Edward failed to show up for a meeting with his probation officer later that month. Authorities contacted Jay Smith, the last person known to have had contact with the couple. Jay Smith told people that Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger had run away to California. He said they owed money to some drug dealers in the area and had fled to the West Coast. However, he was unable to provide any further information about the incident. Edward and Stephanie Huntsberger lived a nomadic life, so their disappearance went unnoticed for some time. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for burglary. When police searched Jay's home, they found several suspicious items, including weapons, drugs, security uniforms, badges, and pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and office supplies stolen from a nearby school. Jay was suspected of being involved in recent armed robberies. During the burglary trial, Jay's friend William testified that they were on vacation when the robberies occurred. However, the jury did not believe this testimony. Jay had a bad reputation in Upper Merion and was known as the Prince of Darkness. Jay Smith was eventually sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979, for a series of store robberies that took place in the late 1970s. During the investigation, Jay was arrested for burglary. Although Jay was in custody, the police still considered him a prime suspect in Susan's murder and continued to investigate his past. They made a remarkable discovery: Jay's daughter and son-in-law had also disappeared under similar circumstances as Susan and her 2 children. This led the police to suspect that there might be a connection between the 2 disappearances, Susan's death and the disappearance of her children. First, Susan had been killed by a morphine overdose, and a large amount of morphine had been discovered in Jay's home several months earlier. Second, a plastic comb with Jay's identification had been found in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law closely resembled the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that unfolded in this case were shocking and left a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking truth was yet to be revealed. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was found near Harrisburg, investigators discovered a potential motive for the horrific murder that was financial gain. On July 20, 1979, a Philadelphia attorney filed a motion to stay the execution of Susan's will in both Montgomery County and Delaware. The motion was filed on behalf of Kenneth Reinert, Susan's ex-husband, and Patrick Gallagher, her brother. The purpose of this legal action was to give both men an opportunity to review the contents of Susan's will before it was executed. They decided to file in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was near the county line, allowing her to file her will in both places. It was later discovered that just a few weeks before her death, Susan had made several significant changes to her will. She had also purchased several large life insurance policies, naming her current boyfriend, William, as the beneficiary. In the legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24, 1979. William and other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and remained there until the afternoon of Monday, June 25. However, it was unclear exactly where William was during the time of Susan's disappearance, casting doubt on his alibi. The investigation also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her account, totaling approximately $25,000, through multiple transactions due to daily limits. She told the bank staff that she intended to invest the money in high-yield investments managed by William, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan did not expect was that she was just one of many women in William's life. He was secretly dating several other people, including a coworker who taught English, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly 10 years. William had promised Susan that the investments would yield large returns to finance their upcoming wedding and move to England. During the investigation, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. They later discovered that William had sold these fake securities to Susan and then passed them on to her. These securities were mostly related to fictitious and worthless companies, suggesting that William had been deceiving Susan for a long time. This discovery added a new dimension to the case, further clarifying William's financial motives. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil lawsuit. During his first appearance, he refused to answer questions directly and referred questions to his legal counsel. Although William's attorneys denied that he had taken Susan's money, they were willing to negotiate with the state to settle the matter and handle Susan's $1 million will. By June 1980, William had officially testified in court for the first time. He denied most of the allegations related to the case, insisting that his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her relatives. He also denied any plans to marry Susan later that year, contrary to what Susan had shared with her close friends. William made unsubstantiated allegations about Susan's relationship with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, although there was no evidence to support these claims. On the contrary, many of Susan's relatives and friends confirmed her long-term relationship with William. It should be noted that Jay Smith was in prison during the trial. William did not explain why Susan chose him as the heir to her $1 million-plus estate. Instead, he described Susan as unreliable and troubled. William also blamed Susan for her problems and claimed that he was only helping to solve her problems, especially in the civil lawsuit over the missing $25,000. In June 1980, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit. They wanted to recover the entire $450,000 insurance policy that Susan had received a few weeks before her death. The intention was to put the money in a trust fund to conduct their own investigation. The case was complicated and full of unexpected events. On February 20, 1981, William was arrested by the police on 3 charges, 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy. He was accused of keeping $25,000 that Susan had given him to invest. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but his criminal trial was scheduled to begin the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the civil case was closed. It was decided that $36,000 from Susan's estate would be used to further investigate the children's clothing and settle a dispute over the remainder of her will. This prevented William from receiving any money on August 3, 1981. William's criminal trial lasted 5 days and ended with a guilty verdict on the theft charge. Delaware County District Attorney Edward Weiss then asked that William's bail be increased from $25,000 to $75,000. The reason was that they believed this sentence increased the risk of William fleeing, especially since there was a possibility that he would be charged with murder. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, William was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police on several felony charges, including 3 counts of murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, and obstruction of justice. The jury concluded that William knew about the plan to kill Susan and her children and was involved in the crimes. Although J. Smith was believed to be involved, he was not charged at the time. Part of the indictment was based on the testimony of Proctor Noel, a fellow inmate, who stated that during a game of chess, William confessed to his involvement in the murders. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 was a major step in the investigation of the case. Although there was no physical evidence linking William to Susan Reinert's death or the disappearance of her children, prosecutors were confident in the case. William's previous burglary convictions and his connection to the suspected body dumping led to more serious charges in the 1980s. J. Smith, who was serving time for other crimes, was forced to testify before a grand jury despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. William Bradfield was also called to testify in 1984, but details of his testimony have not been released. The hearing was reportedly related to the disappearances of Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples to compare with old documents that might be related to the plan to kill Susan Reinert. This investigation led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinert's body was found. Jay was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and held in custody while awaiting trial. In 1984, Joseph Wambaugh, a well-known crime author, published a book about the case. The book supported the theory that Jay was the killer. A television movie based on the book was later produced, bringing the case to national attention. Jay maintained his innocence throughout his imprisonment. He appealed and accused William Bradfield of framing him. In 1989, the court reviewed the case and found problems with the indictment, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a more thorough investigation. In 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning the murder conviction and finding the prosecution guilty. For the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing Jay to live out his life in freedom. William Bradfield continued to evade liability and refused to pay the $25,000 owed to Susan Reinert's estate. The case dragged on until 1996. Jay sued the state and Joseph Wambaugh for defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, after more than 10 years in prison, was found unconscious in his cell and died of cardiac arrest. Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinert, died in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. Jay Smith, who was exonerated in 1992, wrote a book about his case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009. However, the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie Hunsberger and Edward Hunsberger, remains unsolved to this day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Morgan. Alexandra Morgan, known as Alexandra to friends and family, is a single mother of 2 children, aged 4 and 11. They live in Wilsley Pound, Cranbrook, Kent. Alexandra has lost contact with the children's father and has had to raise them on her own, which has not been easy. According to some sources, she works as a dog groomer. Alexandra is described as a dynamic and ambitious woman who is always looking after her children. She wants her children to have a better life and has worked hard to achieve it. On November 13, 2021, Alexandra met her parents and left her children in their care. She said she was going on a spa holiday with friends for 3 days. However, by November 17, Alexandra had not returned to pick up her children as scheduled. Her parents began to worry because they could not contact Alexandra by phone or text, which was very unusual. After several unsuccessful attempts to find their daughter, they decided to report Alexandra missing to the police. Kent police suspect that Alexandra Morgan's disappearance is related to a crime. They began their investigation by looking into the spa where Alexandra said she was going to go with friends. The police also wanted to identify these friends. Start an investigation. Police have obtained video footage from a gas station in Cranbrook where Alexandra was last seen. They are trying to locate her by looking for her white Mini Cooper. On the morning of November 14th, Alexandra went to the gas station to fill up, made a few purchases, and then left. The video shows nothing unusual. Rose McCauley, the petrol station manager who has known Alexandra for 17 years, was there when Alexandra bought £10 worth of petrol, a cup of coffee and a snack on the morning she went missing. Rose said that no one knew what had happened to her or where she had gone. Rose continued that a friend and she had searched all over Hastings, but Alexandra was nowhere to be seen. She said that Alexandra wasn't shy, so she didn't think Alexandra was scared to go home. Rose just hoped nothing bad had happened and that Alexandra would get back safely. It was worrying, she added. When Alexandra arrived that Sunday morning, she was very well dressed, with more makeup than usual, her hair done and some eye-catching clothes. She arrived earlier than usual, looking happy and smiling. Alexandra's friends mentioned that in 2018, she shared on social media about being stalked by a stalker. In 2019, she posted a photo with the caption, "Hello Stalker," and included a message asking the stalker to stop following her page. A police spokesman said that it was unusual for Alexandra to have not contacted her family and that they were treating it as a possible murder. As the investigation continued, they were appealing for anyone who might have seen Alexandra or her white Mini Cooper with a black top to contact them. He added that even if people were not sure what they saw, they should report any suspicious information. Alexandra was described as a woman approximately 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with shoulder-length brown hair. She was last seen wearing a knee-length green quilted jacket, a black top underneath, ripped blue jeans, knee-high black boots, and a silver necklace. Usually, when someone goes missing, they don't leave any traces behind to help the police investigate. Many missing cases remain unsolved. However, Alexandra Morgan's case is different. She left behind the last digital traces that helped the police find clues to her fate. Not only that, these traces also revealed some shocking secrets. Further investigation helped the police find out more information about Alexandra. She wanted to improve her finances, so she started working as a call girl and advertised her services online, without telling her family and friends. Women in this profession are among the most vulnerable. Everyone knows that they face risks, because it is impossible to know in advance whether the next customer is normal or dangerous. This job is unsafe. According to the investigation, Alexandra had an appointment with a regular customer before she went missing. The police have arrested this man. On November 25, 2021, they arrested a 40-year-old man, Mark Brown, from St. Leonards-on-Sea on suspicion of murder. Mark Brown, a construction worker who is married with a son. His family were completely unaware of his secret life. Sussex police said that before Alexandra went missing, she had met Mark several times, and he had even bought her a Mini Cooper. Their first meeting took place on June 8, 2021, after Mark spotted her on an adult website. They met at her home in Sissinghurst, near Cranbrook, Kent. Things went well, and they continued to meet occasionally after that. The second meeting took place on June 21st, nearly 2 weeks later. This time, Alexandra went to Little Bridge Farm near Hastings, Kent, a property Mark rented to meet women and for other purposes. They met 7 more times in August and September. Alexandra did not realize she was falling into a trap. On October 23, 2021, Mark sent her a text message asking if she would like to engage in a risk-free business transaction. He made an offer that involved £100,000 for 35 days at a hotel he would protect, a new ID, a straight car, and money for shopping. Mark asked her to do some simple tasks: go out for a smoke, pack the money, and buy a few things. After receiving this offer, Alexandra did some online research, which showed that she wanted to improve her children's lives. She learned about the minimum deposit for buying a house in 2021. Alexandra also intended to use the money to start a business. She searched for information such as profits from opening a sunbed shop in the UK and taxes to pay on £100,000. These actions showed Alexandra's character and desire to improve her life. Alexandra lied to her parents that she was going to the spa with friends, but in fact she was planning to meet Mark at the farm. On the morning of November 14th, she left home and was recorded on CCTV buying petrol in Cranbrook at 7:20 a.m. She arrived at Little Bridge Farm at around 8 a.m. 3 days later, on November 17th, Mark drove Alexandra's car to Holmhurst Lane, St. Leonard's, after replacing the real number plates with fake ones. The following day, November 18th, Alexandra's mother reported her daughter to the police because she had not picked her up and had stopped communicating. On November 23rd, police discovered CCTV footage of Alexandra's car following Mark's Jaguar to Little Bridge Farm. Kent police sealed off the entrance to the farm and interviewed Mark. He admitted meeting Alexandra but claimed she had left after 45 minutes. Mark agreed to allow police to take his fingerprints and DNA. 2 days later, on November 25th, police arrested Mark as the prime suspect in Alexandra Morgan's disappearance. Before we get into what happened to Alexandra, we need to go back to when she met Mark Brown. At that time, Mark had a wife named Leah Ware. She was 33, and she was a mother of 3 who does not have custody of her children. Leah first met Mark on March 25, 2018, through a prostitution website where she advertised her services. A few years later, this same website is where Mark met Alexandra Morgan. In late 2018, Mark and Leah began a relationship and moved into an apartment together. After 6 months, when their lease expired, Leah moved into a shipping container at Mark's Little Bridge Farm. Mark describes their relationship as a roller coaster of ups and downs. Leah has had a complicated life. She received weekly benefits, which were usually administered by Mark. She had a history of drug use and mental illness, but many said she was trying to improve herself in order to gain custody of her children. Mark and Leah were in a 3-year relationship before Leah mysteriously disappeared in May 2021. On the evening of May 5th and early morning of May 6th, Leah was with Jack Tyler, a friend and convicted drug dealer. They used drugs together and had an intimate relationship that night. This was the last time anyone saw Leah. The last call from her phone was made at 8:55 a.m. on May 7th. Police believe Leah died that day. On June 8, 2021, Mark met Alexandra for the first time at her home. The meeting went well and Alexandra found Mark to be a reasonable and generous man. However, she did not know that just a month earlier, Leah, who had been in a relationship with Mark, had disappeared without a trace. During the investigation, detectives discovered important text messages from Mark. He sent them to his ex-girlfriend from high school 5 days after meeting Alexandra Morgan. However, the content of the messages had nothing to do with Alexandra and were about Leah. The message reads, "I'll try to be careful. This happened recently. It's a nasty thing to get rid of. Just an old oil drum, 5 liters of diesel, and everything is gone. It burns so hot, it almost glows white. My actions are heartbreaking. It's ironic that a psychopath has a conscience. Investigators suspect Alexandra Morgan is dead and may not be Mark's only victim. Sussex police are appealing to the public for help in locating Leah or her body, as well as any information relating to her disappearance. After arresting Mark on November 25, 2021, police searched his farm and found a container that showed signs of having been recently burned. Inside the container, experts found bone and tooth remains. Tests confirmed that these were those of Alexandra Morgan. In a joint statement, Kent and Sussex police expressed their condolences to Alexandra and Leah's families. They confirmed that Alexandra's remains had been found, but Leah's remains have not yet been found. The investigation is ongoing and police are appealing for anyone with information. Police described Leah as a white woman, 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with very long black hair and blue eyes. She had 3 tattoos, a dragon on her right leg, Chinese characters on her right hip, and a fairy sitting on a flower with the name Ryan on her right leg. The search of Mark's house lasted about a month and ended on January 7, 2022. During the investigation, police discovered the skeleton of a Pomeranian dog at the bottom of the pond, with a heavy object tied to its neck. Investigators believe this was Leah's dog, which Mark threw into the pond after killing Leah. On February 1, 2022, police charged Mark with the murder of Leah Ware, although they did not find her remains. Mark had previously been charged with the murder of Alexandra Morgan. Mark initially denied all charges. However, when police presented evidence of him burning Alexandra Morgan's body, Mark admitted to Alexandra's death, but maintained that it was an accident. Mark Brown's trial began on October 17, 2022. During the trial, new information about the 2 cases was revealed. The jury heard that after Leah Ware went missing on May 7, 2021, Mark regularly used her new bank card to withdraw money from her account each week. The bank card was sent to the address of his sister Cheryl. In July 2021, the jury was informed that Mark had twice withdrawn £200 from Leah Ware's account shortly after transferring £200 into his own. When asked why, Mark explained that he could have used her £200 and then paid it back, as at that point, someone owed him £430, so he could have paid it back. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson asked if it was a coincidence that Leah had died after getting a new bank card. A surprised Mark replied that he didn't understand what Duncan meant and that, as far as he knew, Leah was still alive. Duncan continued by asking if Mark was trying to take Ms. Leah's money and pointed out that Leah was in a place where money didn't mean anything. Mark was confused and said he didn't understand what Duncan was talking about at all, adding that it sounded like they were talking about 2 different people. During the trial for Alexandra Morgan's death, Mark maintained that it was an accident. He explained that Alexandra slipped and fell on a piece of equipment in the workshop he rented at Little Bridge Farm, causing her to hit her head. When he rushed to her, he found Alexandra bleeding profusely. He grabbed a towel to try to stop the bleeding. But when he lifted her head to put the towel under, more blood came out. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson objected to the defendant's testimony, stating that when the defendant first saw the victim lying on her back on the ground, there was a lot of blood around her head. This clearly showed that she was seriously injured and needed immediate help, especially medical attention. This was obvious before the defendant did anything else. Mark replied that he was panicking and his first reaction was to grab a towel to stop the bleeding. After performing CPR and checking for breathing by holding a mirror to Alexandra Morgan's mouth and nose, Mark confirmed that she was dead. Over the next 5 minutes, he did 3 things. He used his sweater to block the blood, he went outside to vomit, and he retrieved his phone to call 911. He explained that he then decided to cover up the whole thing by wrapping Alexandra in a sleeping bag and wrapping a towel around her head to stop the bleeding. He questioned how he could prove it was an accident and admitted that the decision to cover it up was stupid and the worst mistake of his life. Mark then decided to dispose of Alexandra's body using an incinerator he had built from an old oil drum earlier that year and which he had often used to burn rubbish. "I had heard stories about burning dead bodies," he said, "and I didn't want anyone to stumble upon a body lying around." Mark therefore maintained that he had nothing to do with Leah Ware's disappearance and believed she was still alive, while Alexandra's death was assumed an accident. At the trial, the court heard testimony from Mark's boss, Alan, who said that Mark had warned him that the police might come to arrest him. This conversation took place on November 24th. When Alan asked why the police might arrest him, Mark replied, "For double murder." This answer was significant because Mark implicitly admitted that Leah Ware was dead and that Alexandra Morgan's death was not an accident. Mark denied those words, claiming he only mentioned a 25-year sentence for one murder, not a double murder. Prosecutor Duncan asked about the murder, and Mark admitted his feelings about Alexandra's case made him act as he did, despite his inability to prove his innocence. The jury also heard that Mark had deliberately smeared Alexandra and Leah reputations, as the prosecutor put it, to create a false image of the women. What people should remember about Leah and Alexandra is that they were always smiling and happy in life. They both deserve to be remembered by their loved ones for the wonderful qualities they were. On December 1, 2022, a jury of 12 found Mark, 41, guilty on all counts. Judge Nicholas Hilliard said, "This is an extremely serious case and the impact on the victim's family is immeasurable." He announced that Mark would be sentenced to life in prison and that he would have to decide what minimum time Mark should serve, or even whether to grant clemency. The judge stressed that if Mark revealed what he had done to Leah Ware's body, he would take that information into account when sentencing. However, Mark did not take this opportunity. Before the judge delivered his verdict, the court heard from Leah Ware's mother, Rebecca Martin, about the impact the case had had on the family. "Mark continues to cause our family pain by not revealing what happened. Leah lost her life because Mark Brown wanted to satisfy his dark desires," she said. "He controlled and manipulated every aspect of her life. When she was no longer of any value, he abandoned her like a lifeless object." The court also heard from Alexandra Morgan's parents, who said Alexandra was intelligent, energetic, and determined to succeed. Despite the challenges she faced, she overcame them and held out hope for her future and the child she loved dearly. On January 13, 2023, the court sentenced Mark Brown to 2 life terms. He will be eligible for parole after 49 years. Judge Hilliard imposed the sentence in absentia because Mark refused to appear. He said, "No sentence can ever measure the number of lives lost. Nothing can undo the defendant's actions, it cannot. His conscience is not troubled by what he has done." Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Garrett. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrett, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Michaela Garrett was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Michaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother. Sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Michaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Michaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Michaela's mother, refused permission. However, Michaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Michaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Michaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Michaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Michaela spotted the scooter first. It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Michaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Michaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Michaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Michaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Michaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Michaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Michaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Michaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Michaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled-up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Michaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers, who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area, belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Michaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Michaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Michaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Michaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Michaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Michaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Michaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Michaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Michaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. Investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Michaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Michaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Michaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Michaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure 2 young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Michaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Michaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he's sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Swartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Michaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Shermantine, one half of the notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Michaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Michaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Michaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Michaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Michaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Michaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case, by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Michaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house, where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder. While David was already serving time for Margaret's murder, new evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California, in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked, they had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Michaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect: David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Michaela's father, Rod Garrick, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Michaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Michaela's mother, was unable to attend a press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Michaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and so a ring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Michaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Michaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Michaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Michaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Michaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Michaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Michaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Sabrina Kutter. Sabrina Kutter was born on December 5, 1982, in a suburb of London. She is of French and Algerian descent from her parents. The combination leads to her exceptionalism. The eldest of 4 children, her family moved to Paris when she was 2 years old, and she grew up there. However, Sabrina's complex personality began to emerge when she went to school. Her former classmates described her as fierce, domineering, self-centered. Sabrina does not make friends easily, and she is especially unfriendly to other smart and beautiful girls, as she sees them as competitors. With her beautiful looks and outstanding height, Sabrina could have pursued a modeling career if she had learned to be friendly with others. However, during her childhood and youth, she often wanted to use others instead of caring about their interests. Sabrina participated in sports and music as a child, but she did not strive and did not achieve success in these areas. While studying at school, Sabrina participated in sports and injured her back. Since then, she had to use prescription painkillers. However, she later tried to obtain painkillers illegally, which led to her arrest and warning. Sabrina focused a lot on herself and her appearance, always craving for attention. She believed that she would have a rich, glamorous, and famous future. For a long time, Sabrina's fantasies had kept her from reality. She believed that her rightful place was in Hollywood. Although Sabrina graduated from the Sorbonne with a degree in English and French literature, since 2006 she has changed careers several times in the fashion industry. She has worked as a stylist, makeup artist, and fashion designer, although she has no real expertise in these fields. Sabrina is a young girl with a charming appearance and a hobby of attracting men. However, she only takes advantage of their feelings, never being serious with them. Instead, she is waiting for the perfect man, a prince, who will fulfill everything she wants. After graduating, Sabrina has not yet determined her life goals. She feels entitled to enjoy life without having to make an effort. However, she enrolls in the prestigious Sorbonne University and works part-time at a sweet shop to earn money. At the sweet shop, Sabrina meets Wissam Madouni, a man 6 years older than her. Wissam is a manager at the headquarters of a large French company and is studying at a prestigious university. He aspires to get a master's degree to advance in his career. Wissam loves Sabrina very much and is willing to fulfill all her wishes. Sabrina also found Wissam attractive and saw him as someone she could control. Besides, she also saw Wissam as a ticket to a wealthy life. He was ambitious and had the potential to be very successful in his career, willing to pamper and please Sabrina. The couple began their relationship in 2000 and after a few months decided to move in together. However, Sabrina quickly revealed her true nature by controlling Wissam in every aspect of his life. If Wissam did not meet her demands, she would get angry and even beat Wissam. Sabrina also openly cheated on Wissam without hiding or justifying her actions. She had feelings for many people, including Wissam's close friends, colleagues, and random acquaintances. Although Wissam tried to end the relationship and leave her many times, he could not escape his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Wissam earned a master's degree and was promoted, earning him a substantial income. However, Wissam spent the money on luxury goods and entertaining Sabrina. Wissam and Sabrina were compatriots of French-Algerian origin. According to some reports, in the fall of 2001, the couple held a special Muslim ceremony to marry, which was certified issued by the Argento Mosque. The couple had a son, but years later, another man named Anthony Francois claimed to be the father of the child. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit hard, causing the company where Wissam worked to go bankrupt and he lost his high-paying job. At this time, Sabrina decided to move to London without discussing it with Wissam. Wissam no longer had any opportunities or hopes for a career here, so he decided to follow Sabrina to London. Upon arriving in London, Wissam found a job at a large bank. However, Sabrina had difficulty finding opportunities in the fashion industry, as she did not have enough skills, experience, and formal education in this field. After that, Sabrina tried many different jobs to find new opportunities. She worked as a nanny, a call center operator, a cafe worker, and even tried her hand at marketing. Sabrina's career journey turned to musician and composer. Despite her best efforts, Sabrina still had difficulty finding opportunities in the music industry. She participated in many auditions and social events to make connections. At one of these events, Sabrina met Mark Walton, a famous musician and composer, who was a member of the famous boy band Boyzone. After leaving the band, Mark became a successful music producer and collaborated with many famous artists such as Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. In 2016, Mark's net worth exceeded $1 billion. Mark was exactly the person who helped Sabrina enter the world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charm. He also had to admit that he fell in love with her at first sight. Their relationship progressed quickly. Sabrina quickly ended her relationship with Wissam. Nothing stands in Sabrina's way. Within weeks, she moved in with Mark in a luxurious house in an upscale area of London. Mark paid all the bills, including rent, for the lavish house Sabrina chose. For months, Sabrina enjoyed the lavish lifestyle she had long desired, socializing with celebrities, attending high society events, wearing high-fashion clothes, and even appearing in magazines. However, when Sabrina became jealous of every woman around Mark and could not control her behavior, Sabrina's true colors began to show. Sabrina became increasingly demanding of extravagant gifts. Mark pampered her with designer clothes, jewelry, and trips to upscale restaurants and clubs, but that wasn't enough for her. The couple's home constantly changed maids, as Sabrina's paranoia led her to believe they were stealing or trying to seduce Mark. Her irrational behavior became too much for Mark to handle. In 2011, he ended the relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina penniless. After breaking up with Mark, Sabrina began giving interviews and accusing Mark of being severely abusive and having a habit of substance abuse. She called Mark constantly, crying and begging him to come back. She even threatened suicide, but he did not change his mind. After realizing that she couldn't win Mark back, Sabrina contacted Wissam, who was now a bank executive. He still loved Sabrina and was willing to forgive her after a period of separation. They reunited and continued living together. When Sabrina became pregnant with Wissam's child, she again informed Mark and claimed that the pregnancy was his. Mark, through his lawyer, expressed his desire to support Sabrina and the unborn child. He offered to pay the monthly child support. However, Sabrina did not agree to the amount of monthly child support that Mark paid. Sabrina wanted to double the child support and Mark did not agree. Mark wanted a paternity test after the child was born. Because Sabrina refused to take a paternity test, Mark did not change the child support. Sabrina sued him. Sabrina made false statements on social media and accused Mark of jealous behavior, threatening her and Wissam, accusing him of breaking into their home, attacking Wissam, and sexually assaulting her in unacceptable ways. However, Sabrina could not prove any of her claims because Mark had been in the United States since their separation, which proved he was not present at the scene. When Mark filed a lawsuit and the police threatened to take action against her, Sabrina stopped making those accusations. After the conflict seemed to have been resolved, she spent a lot of time in Wimbledon, southwest London, with Wissam and her 2 children. Sabrina's life was difficult with the housework and the care of 2 children, so Sabrina decided to hire a nanny to help with the housework. She posted a job ad online and personally conducted the interviews. Most of the candidates did not meet her requirements, and those who did meet her expectations did not stay long in her family. A young French woman named Sophie Lyonnette answered an advertisement for a babysitter. At the time, Sophie was 19 and was back in her home country of France, so the interview was conducted via video call. Sophie agreed to all the terms. Childcare, housekeeping and cooking for a weekly wage of £50. Sophie was born on January 7, 1996, in the small town of Troyes, between Auxerre and Senators. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Leon, were laborers, and the family was in dire financial straits. After graduating, Sophie received a degree in childcare, but had no intention of settling down in her hometown. Instead, she longed to move to a big city to develop her career. Although Sophie was quiet, unsociable, and had a plain appearance, she was very kind and open-minded, which made her loved by those who knew her. Sophie's eyesight was poor, forcing her to wear glasses all day. During a conversation, Sabrina quickly realized that Sophie was a simple and inexperienced person, which made Sophie the perfect target for Sabrina to take advantage of. Moreover, Sophie was eager to gain experience, so she was willing to work for minimum wage. Sophie, having told her parents that Sabrina was a serious and trustworthy employer, thought that working for Sabrina's family would be a good start to her nanny career. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly. She took care of the children, did the housework responsibly. This peaceful period lasted for a few months and there seemed to be no serious problems. However, things began to change when Wissam lost his job. At that time, Sabrina's family only had the monthly child support from Mark as their main source of income. So the family faced serious financial difficulties, high rent and basic living expenses. Sabrina, not wanting to give up her luxurious lifestyle, became irritable and aggressive. She often took her anger out on Sophie, the young nanny. Sabrina and Wissam entered a bakery business with the last of their money, but the venture failed. Sabrina then opened a clothing store but did not have enough funds. She asked Mark for a large sum of money, but was flatly refused, leaving her disappointed. What happened next depends on the source. There are different versions of the story. Some sources claim that Sabrina came up with a plan to use Sophie as a weapon to blackmail Mark. She thought of having Sophie as Mark's accomplice and lover, supposedly planted in Sabrina's home to ruin their lives and endanger the children. Sabrina claimed that the provincial idiot Sophie was in love with Mark. She thought that simply recording Sophie's confession on tape or video and presenting it to the police would be enough evidence to demand compensation from Mark for his cruel actions. However, Sophie refused to lie on camera. Another version, due to her mental disorder, claims that Sabrina actually believed in her conspiracy theory and saw Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. She allegedly did not force the nanny to lie but truly believed that Sophie was Mark's accomplice who had infiltrated their family to harm them. Whatever the truth, Sophie's life soon became a living nightmare. Sophie first faced long hours of overwork and inadequate pay. She ended up working from dawn to dusk, with no time for herself, effectively imprisoned within the walls of the house. Next, her pay was cut off completely. To prevent her from escaping or returning to France, Sabrina took her passport, effectively making her a captive. All her contact with her family was tightly controlled. The situation got worse. Sophie was barely fed and was constantly forced to lie about Mark, whom she had never met or known. Sophie was insulted and threatened, accused of stealing money and valuables. She was threatened with imprisonment if she did not comply with Sabrina's demands. When threats no longer worked, Sabrina resorted to more brutal and sophisticated methods. Sophie was moved to a cold basement, fed only meager food. She became thin and weak, However, the cold and hunger were not the worst. She suffered physical abuse, subjected to the most painful torture. Sabrina broke Sophie's nose in a violent outburst. This division made the story clearer and easier to understand, and made the reader feel more comfortable. However, Sabrina's cruelty continued to increase, causing Sophie to suffer daily torture. The basement of the house, located in an affluent area of London, became a place of torture for Sophie, where she had no hope of being rescued. A strange event occurred in the late summer of 2017, when Sabrina took Sophie to the police to say that Sophie was ready to testify against Mark. However, Sophie remained silent. When the police decided to talk to Sophie privately, they took her to a separate apartment. At this point, Sabrina was extremely worried, afraid that Sophie would reveal the horrors that were happening at their home, which would implicate her and her husband. Mysteriously, Sophie chose not to reveal anything or seek help. The police response was also strange. Despite seeing a young woman who was malnourished, frightened and weak, they did not call a doctor or psychologist to ensure her health and safety. At the time, 21-year-old Sophie weighed less than 40 kilograms, had lost some of her hair, was missing a front tooth and was walking with a noticeable limp. However, none of this worried the police, who simply sent everyone home. By mid-September, Sophie made her final phone call to her mother. She confessed to her that she wanted to return home but did not have enough money. Sophie's mother, Catherine, only telling her that she would buy her a ticket and asking her to pack her things immediately. This was the last time Sophie spoke to her mother. On the evening of September 20th, 2017, something unexpected happened at Sabrina's house. A neighbor called the police about a fire in the yard, but what worried them was not the fire, but an unpleasant smell coming from the fire. The smell was similar to that of burnt flesh and hair, combined with something that could not be identified. This stench spread through the air and stuck to the clothes and skin of everyone around. When the firefighters and police arrived at the scene, they put out the fire. However, the homeowner appeared calm and did not know why the police and fire service had visited their home. The police saw what looked like a charred human hand in the ashes. Sabrina and Wissam were immediately arrested and the badly burned remains were removed from the fire. The sex and age of the deceased were unknown, but the body was soon identified as Sophie Lionnet, identified by the melted metal frame embedded in her skull that Sophie always wore. Determining Sophie's cause of death was difficult. Forensic experts found severe injuries to her body, including multiple broken ribs, a broken jaw, and signs of blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs. This suggests that she suffered these injuries while she was alive. Additionally, some of her teeth were missing and her nose was severely damaged, suggesting that she had been severely beaten. The discovery of horrifying videos of abuse inside the house exposed the brutal nature of Sophie's kidnappers. She had been violently attacked in a variety of ways, including with fists, iron wires, golf clubs, and electric shocks. She had also endured humiliation, including being forced to hold her head in a toilet bowl until she suffocated. Experts believe that Sophie may have died of asphyxiation just before being burned at the stake, which would have spared her the terrible pain of being alive while being burned. During the trial, both Sabrina and Wissam denied guilt and showed no remorse for their brutal actions. After the murder, Wissam went to a nearby supermarket to buy fuel to burn the body and cooked dinner for his family, as if the murder had never happened. The couple's first trial began in March 2018. Sabrina attempted to portray herself as the victim, blaming Mark for driving her into a pathological state with his relentless torture. However, medical tests showed that although Sabrina suffered from a mental disorder, she was not insane and fully understood her actions. Wissam was psychologically dependent on Sabrina despite his physical strength. She had a great influence over him and he would blindly listen to her every word. A former lover of Sabrina spoke out during the trial, describing her as a cunning manipulator rather than a crazy woman. On June 26, 2018, the court found Sabrina Kuder and Wissam Maduni guilty of torturing, insulting, and murdering nanny Sophie. The couple were sentenced to life in prison and must serve at least 30 years before being paroled. However, neither of them pleaded guilty. They repeatedly appealed for a lighter sentence. Sabrina even tried to pretend to be insane for a while to be transferred to a hospital instead of prison. But this plan failed. Mark Walton, who attended the trial, expressed remorse for his past relationship with Sabrina. He said she committed all these barbaric crimes to attract attention and make money from him. Mark sends his deepest condolences to Sophie's parents.